right, welcome to Now This Is Podcasting. I'm your host, Connor, and I have my co-host, Jaden,
Yee.
and former guest, Calvin.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, and we're going to add another movie to our list of favorites. This is, we're going to talk about The Fountain, and this is one of Calvin's favorites, so...
Yeah, so buckle up.
Yeah, it's a... Yeah, I don't know that this movie is... It's not my favorite, but...
That's why we're doing mine.
Yeah, and but I think it's really interesting, and I'm excited to talk about it because I think it has a lot of there's a lot of like really neat aspects to it. So I'm excited to dive into this one, and as per usual, just kind of going over the stats. This film's directed by Darren Aronofsky. I think we've brought him up before because I mentioned like Mother. He did that. Black Swan, Requiem for a Dream,
The Wrestler,
Yeah.
Pie, Noah.
Yeah, he's done. I mean, this is sort of because this came out in like 2006. This is kind of like one of his earlier kind of big. Well, because Requiem for a Dream came out way before that too.
Not way before that. I want to say it was 2001.
Oh,
2000 or
okay.
2001. It was around,
Yeah.
it was a I Am Sam contemporary.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So he's done plenty of stuff. He has a pretty big filmography. So when I was looking at this, because I always like to check out the box office and the budget, I was like surprised by this. So it had a budget of 35 million and a box office of 16, which shocked me because this movie's like not bad. So I didn't understand why it did so poorly. And so then I looked into some of his other movies, like The Wrestler came out after that. It was even a smaller budget. It was 16 million and it made 44 million. Then I think it's like kind of big breakout movie that is really critically acclaimed and pretty popular was Black Swan.
It's actually Requiem for a Dream. He was actually more famous from Requiem for a Dream for a long time, and it has
You're probably right.
It has a big cult following, more so than the other ones.
I think the thing is I didn't really enjoy that movie, so I don't really think about it. I watched it and I was like, it's whatever. To me, I just personally didn't really connect with that movie. But Black Swan was 13 million and it made like 329 million. Like that was an insanely popular movie.
Yeah, and it was. I think the biggest thing too to think about is how each one of those was marketed. Black Swan was marketed like crazy.
Right. Yeah. I absolutely knew that this movie was coming out and
everybody
Yep.
knew about the Mila Kunis, Natalie
Kissing Natalie
Portman
Portman
lesbian
thing,
yeah.
scene. That was like.
Sure,
I'm
that's
sure
a
not the-
big reason why some of the tickets sold.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But
it's
I'm
not
just
like
saying,
the draw, but like
you're
that
right,
was-
'cause-
it created a lot of hype.
Yeah, because I don't super remember hearing about The Fountain, but I absolutely remember hearing about Black Swan. You're right, they're marketed very differently. I think that kind of launched him into like Noah, which is like a really kind of big movie. That one has 125 to 160 $1 budget. I think they kind of keep that vague because marketing factors into that, so they don't like really know exactly what the budget is. But that did about the same as Black Swan, is 359 million. So I mean, he's done like stuff that is successful.
Yeah.
And I know who Darren Aronofsky is, and so that's why I was surprised by this kind of film's like its lack of box office draw. Especially the other thing I want to say is, so this came out in 2006. By that point, Hugh Jackman had been in 3 X-Men movies. X-Men 3, the Phoenix one, came out the same year. It came out in 2006. Like Hugh Jackman is like, we're talking about like peak Hugh Jackman here. Like this is a hyper famous Hollywood star. And so how does he show up in this movie? And it's a total dud. I was so confused by it because it's not bad and you have a great cast in it. So it was really weird to me, like seeing those numbers.
Yeah, a big part of it might have been I can't remember when the Matrix trilogy films were all released, but those generally overshadowed every other sci-fi film in that time period. So because of the marketing and because of how weird it was, the budget cuts, all of that, it does not surprise me that it did as bad as it did. Because it's also probably one of his weaker films. It is one of my favorites for a number of reasons, but it's not great. It's not great as part of his catalog. It's certainly, if you've seen Mother, because that's a little bit more recent.
That's his most recent one.
Yeah, it's a pretty similar feel.
That's actually one of my least favorite movies I think I've ever watched. Is in terms of like a director who I know is talented and like can tell good stories. That's the most pretentious movie I've ever seen in my life, and it's I like when you can have a good story put on film in a clever way. That movie is so like beating you over the head with like how clever it is and how smart it is and how film festival this movie is, but it somehow got this really wide release, and I think it's it's his weakest movie I've ever seen. It's one of my least favorite movies I've ever seen. I did not care for Mother at all.
Yeah, I know I love them for their flaws. I love what I'll say this is like why I like The Fountain is it's this richly imagined story of universal truths told with dazzling lights and moving performances and an amazing score. I love the music here, and it's religious. It's full of religious symbolism, and it abounds in the mundane and the exotic, but it equates the two through their source, the shared human journey, like on the constant precipice of death. How do we define ourselves? And I mean, it has its flaws, but it stands as one of my favorites for its atmosphere, uh, its reflection of my own personal worldview, and its influence, especially on my filmmaking style, mostly to my detriment.
Right.
Because part of the problem is it just throws everything in there, and I understand like that's the same. It's the same thing. The same feeling that you have in Mother is the same problem that you have here. It's so many symbols, so many things going on, that sometimes it's a little it's too understated, sometimes it's too overstated, sometimes it's just enough, but it's so uneven that it's really jarring for a viewer and for the audience in general that
Right.
you know it pulls you in and out of how you care if you care about the narrative so often that a lot of people are just gonna like this is just weird and dumb or pretentious.
Yeah, see, that's the thing is I didn't find this movie pretentious at all, and I didn't think it was beating me over the head with its symbolism. Like that, again, that's my problem with Mother. I didn't think that this movie did that at all. I just think so. This is your favorite. You've seen it a bunch of times, and you've analyzed it. Jade and I, we saw it for the first time, prior to this podcast. So, I think for me, I was mostly just looking for like I wanted to see the performances. Like, what do I like about it? Just like it was just a general grasp of the narrative. Like, what do I like about it? And that's like mostly what I took away. So I think I'm excited to hear what you have to say because I wanted to hear maybe the things I missed,
Oh,
which I
there's a
think is
lot.
what which I
There's a
think is like
lot.
it's like I think it's what we always kind of strive for in this podcast is like let's analyze this and pick apart like kind of the cool things that are happening behind the scenes that make these scenes and these movies so great. And so that's why I'm excited to hear what you had to say. Um, do you have more information on like why? Because I talked about the budget. Like, why did this movie
Yeah.
get the reception it did?
Oh,
Like,
it's so the whole production is actually crazy. The um the it was originally supposed to be shot in Australia. They had massive sets made. The opening sequence was supposed to be like some 200 conquistadors, or well, it was supposed to be about 1,000 people.
I read that too. Yeah.
Yeah, of a mix of Mayans and conquistadors. It was supposed to be an incredibly um, choreographed and large scale scene. Then, partway through building all of the sets, the studio canned the whole film. Yeah,
Do you know how it like how did it pick back up again? Like why did it? Do you know why it continued being made after it was?
yeah,
'Cause- yeah.
so he decided to rewrite the script, and what he described it as taking more of an independent spirit to how he wanted to tell this story.
Which just translates to I don't have enough money to make an expansive story.
Yeah,
Which I
exactly.
think it actually works for this movie. I think I actually kind of like that first fight. Where
Yeah,
it is,
I
it's
cannot.
like
Yeah. Thinking about a lot what it was supposed to be, I was like, that's stupid. That sounds
'cause
so dumb.
it aligns more the way this movie is. It's one guy doing whatever it takes to kind of reach this goal, and it kind of wouldn't have made sense to be like you wouldn't have gotten the feel like it's one man on a mission to achieve something if he's then surrounded by 200 other people. And so I kind of like the opening where it's him and two other guys who are like immediately like taken out, and then they keep going. A little fun fact about that opening scene. So there's like 70 kind of like Mayan warriors. Out of the 70 extras there, 20 of them are actual like from like Mayan descent. They were like flown in from like Guatemala, and the only one who could speak English is like kind of that chief at the very top with the fire sword.
Oh.
Yeah, so he would kind of like relay the messages to the rest of the extras on like what they were supposed to be doing and stuff. But yeah, I think it's really cool that they actually tried to get like people who were descent from like that actual culture to be involved. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, that is cool, and it really helps to the aesthetic and the whole Mayan symbolism for everything.
Yeah. I think that's that's a neat like I said, I love my fun facts. That was a good one, I think.
Yeah. So leading into that, all of the budget cuts. Talk about style. There is almost no CGI in this entire
Yeah, I
film.
was about to ask about that because you were mentioning that when we were watching this, and I was like, "How is that possible? This just seems wild to me."
Yeah, yeah. So the
Yeah.
only place that there are two places that are CGI. It's the end scene when they get to Shibalba and the flowers. That's it. When the flowers take over Tomas's body, they couldn't. It was actually like a mechanical bodysuit that they had sprout
Really?
out. Yeah, like he was basically in a little cage, and they were like little like animatronics just and
I don't.
shot out. Like,
Yeah, I guess
but
I
they
don't.
couldn't get it. They couldn't get the flowers
Yeah.
to do that.
I don't realize how expensive visual effects are, or how, but somehow visual effects seems like it would be cheaper than like a big animatronic setup to do that. I don't know. I guess I just don't know enough about filmmaking to like figure out
Yeah, I've,
what the
I've,
differences
I've always
cost.
been confused by that too.
Yeah, it's like it seems like it would be like, yeah, someone can just make that on a
Like
computer
people,
like
when they
pretty
talk
quick.
about
Yeah.
like how expensive Game of Thrones is to make, it's like
Yeah.
mostly rendering the dragons. It's
Yeah.
like, that just seems like the wildest thing to me. You guys
Yeah.
are in castles and
Yeah,
like,
it,
Right.
It's the man hours required to build
That's
the
yeah,
model.
that's
Yeah.
what I've learned.
But it's like
about
somehow
it.
you
It's
can make
just-
these real sets.
that means
that
they're
are-
making pretty good money doing this
Yeah.
stuff too, which is
No, they're
No?
not them individually
Yeah.
because we've looked at the like we were talking about when we saw Black Widow, like
the
all
wall
of
of
the
text. Yeah.
the
yeah.
visual
There are
artists,
so
like,
many. That's a fair. That's a good
yeah,
point.
they're just a dime a dozen. Anybody can do it as far as the industry is concerned.
Yeah, like the
'Cause
people
it takes a
who know how.
village.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so
Yeah,
that's
so
interesting because okay,
yeah, so,
so
why
Jane
I
had-
love thinking about this. Like why do you think there isn't any why there should be CGI?
So I was confused. So Jane and I talked about this earlier without you, and because he was saying that because you two watched it together, and he had mentioned to me that you had said that there's no CGI or very limited. How is that possible? Like the whole every time they're floating in the little bubble through space, I don't understand how that cannot be
Yeah,
visual
I'd
effects.
also like to know this as well.
And so I'm excited to hear why because I was like that is clearly a visual effects shot
Yeah,
to me, and so I'm
it's-
interested to know why it's not.
So it's visual effects department, but it's not computer generated. So green screen is still something that's everywhere in the film.
Okay.
So the way it works then is it's practical shots superimposed on other practical shots. So the way they got that all of those textures of the nebula and the stars and everything, it's one of my favorites because in school we accidentally did the same thing. So what they did is they commissioned a studio that it's just a dude that actually works with macro lenses, and what he does is he takes like little petri dishes with different fluids and creates chemical reactions and
Then films that.
then films that, and it's just this moving waves of color and fluid.
and then that's just kind of like inlaid on top of like a Starfield background.
Yeah, so the
Oh,
the whole
okay.
the whole tree is built and
Right.
green screen everywhere, and then you come in and put that into the green screen.
Okay, that's a little different than what I thought. When you say like no computer generated, I guess that makes sense. But I was like, well, there's clearly visual effects shots in this. Like that's it's. I guess it's just visual effects, not as like I usually think about it, because that to me is usually like, in like Black Widow, like a giant avalanche coming down the mountain. Like that's a big visual effects shot. And so I this is visual effects too, but it's not like computer generated to the same degree as what you're talking about, or at all.
Yeah,
So that's
exactly.
that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so me and a friend, we were in avant-garde film class, and we were messing around with
That
little.
sounds so fucking pretentious. Like you have a class to teach you how to be a snob. Like
Yeah, well, it was more deconstructing, like through participation and theory, the more avant-garde tendencies of certain films and
Right.
certain film ideas and periods. And so we were messing around with petri dishes on like one of those old school projectors, with the clear laminate, and teachers would write on. That's
Right,
how
right,
we
yeah,
used
no,
to
I
do
know
math,
exactly what
like
you're
back
talking
in
about,
the day. Like I'm sure there's plenty of people like. You have to be over 30, it sounds like, to actually understand
Yeah, I
like what's
guess,
going
yeah.
on anymore. Like, but we were playing around with a petri dish and and dropping little bits of color in there, and all of a sudden we looked at the screen and we're like, oh my god, we just made the fountain. It was yellow and black and a starscape, but things swirled.
That's cool.
I was like, this has to be how they did it. And to find out that's actually how they did it, I was like, oh my god, I'm a filmmaker.
Yeah, no, that's actually
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
really love that because that's like when we first invited you on, and then you just decided to stay. Like I love it for reasons like that because like I have no idea that, and but you have this background and you have this knowledge of it. That's such a cool thing, and the fact that you were able to kind of recreate something out of like one of your favorite films, I think that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's
and
really cool.
organically too, which is
Yeah.
another like it's another like fun thing. Like yeah, everything is connected. Like because this film is just like yeah, everything. This is like this is why like I had such a problem getting to a leaf is just a leaf is because I
Right.
love films like this where everything is something and means something and it means three things
Right.
and it's connected to the past and the present and the future, and which is why I have a hard time like breaking down how to discuss this film because you can't talk about one thing without talking about two other timelines
Right.
and then literally the whole point of the film.
So did we want to like break this down into like kind of describe our kind of interpretation of each timeline and then
Yeah.
tie it all together?
I don't know about interpretation, but maybe interpretation. But yeah, let's talk
Yeah,
about
synopsis, I guess.
let's talk about the we'll call them present, past, and future. I think those would be
Right.
the easiest way of describing it.
Yeah.
So let's start with present.
Yeah, so that's Tommy. Is
Yeah.
what he goes
Tommy
by, right?
and
Tom or
Rachel-
Tommy, yeah.
Yeah, and Izzy.
Yeah, Izzy.
Yeah, Rachel Weisz's character Izzy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Fun fact: Darren Aronofsky is married to Rachel Weisz
During this movie, right?
During this shooting, yeah, like
I did read that. So she wasn't the original casting for it. The actual original casting was Brad Pitt and Kate Blanchett.
oh my gosh, and why Benjamin Button came after
And
this,
so,
right?
what I read is
Benjamin
that
Button's like 2008.
what I read is that Brad Pitt and Darren Aronofsky just had creative differences, and he ended up moving on. And I think probably part of the moving on had to do with the movie getting canned, maybe.
Yeah.
And so then Hugh Jackman signs on, and he
Yeah,
was the one.
2008.
He was the one who actually convinced Darren Aronofsky to have Rachel Weisz play Izzy in this because he
Oh,
he
that's
said
right. I forgot about
he said he
that.
doesn't want to do favoritism, and he like purposely kind of doesn't try to cast kind of his favorite actors or people close to him. So obviously he wouldn't cast his own wife.
Which is weird because he has like a team of collaborators. Like the
Right.
composer for the film, he uses him for almost all of his films.
I wonder if
But-
maybe it's just different when it's someone on screen. I guess I don't
Yeah,
know.
maybe.
But apparently it,
He just wants to put on the facade that he's not
Yeah, maybe that's
using
true.
nepotism.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess it was Hugh Jackman who was like, I think Rachel Weisz would be really great in this, and he was kind of the driving factor in convincing him to cast Rachel Weisz as Izzy, which I think is great. I think they're both really good in this.
Yeah.
It is interesting to think about what this movie would have looked like with Brad Pitt and Kate Blanchett in it, though. Like, I wonder
kinda-
how it would have worked.
I kind of feel like it would have felt exactly like
I think you're
Benjamin
probably right,
Button.
yeah, yeah.
It's a very similar tone in the way that their relationship was approached in that film as well. So
Yeah.
I think
I wonder
we-
if they
think we
didn't
did
do this
better.
one because of Benjamin Button.
Yeah, they would have
wonder.
been principal probably.
Around the same time they started. I would
Yeah,
imagine
principal-
Benjamin Button took a while to film.
Yeah, well, the thing is like I want to say that principal generally means like 9 months after that. It seems to be the
Yeah.
case that like 9 months to a year, depending on the level of CGI that's required. So it certainly would have been in the works if they had in 2006. But if this is filming in 2005
Yeah.
and 2004, then they probably I don't even know if that was greenlit anywhere yet. So that's an interesting conversation. But it's cool that they ended up getting another movie together.
Yeah. That movie's good. I like Benjamin Button.
Yeah, I
Prettiest
don't.
case of Benjamin Button.
Yeah, I don't know if how I'll feel about it now. So right now I'll keep my rose-colored
Yeah,
glasses.
right.
I love that. Kate Blanchett's a fantastic actress. and
Yeah.
Brad Pitt is criminally underrated as a
Oh, I love Brad
high-minded.
Pitt, dude.
I think
Yeah.
he just gets put in the almost like the same categories like Brad Pitt. I mean, sorry, as Tom Cruise. Just this hyper famous is just kind of universally liked in everything he's in, and he
Yeah.
kind of just gets put into this like category of like mega famous superstars who just maybe do like action movies, and so you just know him for that. But he's done like
Mhm.
really small. Like, do you guys see Ad Astra? It's probably it's
I
one
have
of his
not.
more
I've heard it's
recent
good.
I
Though.
wouldn't call it small though.
I mean, it's not like I don't think it wasn't a big. It wasn't very big, at least commercially. It wasn't very successful.
Well, yeah.
I thought it was a pretty good, and I think he does a really good performances. I think he does a lot of smaller movies. It's just he's so famous that you just associate him with famous guy, and I think you're right. He does get underrated for the performances he gives. Brad Pitt's great,
Yeah, he is.
but I think Hugh Jackman also like is great in this. So I don't think the movie suffers or changes because of the
No,
change in cast at all. I think it's still.
yeah.
I think the performances are all really great in this. So if we want to talk about kind of our present tense Tommy, so he's a doctor, and he's trying to find a cure for his wife Izzy, who has like a brain tumor, and he's trying to figure out how to cure this. Is kind of his whole. That's the whole point of like his character and his what's driving him right now. And I absolutely despise this guy. Like I don't like his character at all. He's extremely selfish to me. There's parts where like Izzy's just trying to kind of like live out her last days and have fun with him and trying to enjoy like her last bit of life. And he would rather do his research and he kind of loses out on all these cool moments he could have had with her because he's trying to figure out a cure. And I think it speaks a lot to like kind of I think the point of this movie is clearly like how do we deal with death? How do we talk about death? And our kind of drive to be immortal. And I think this guy is like he's so selfish. Everything about him is he's trying to keep her alive like for his sake and not keep her alive because he like necessarily wants her to flourish or be alive. It seems like it's all about him.
I don't necessarily agree with that, but what were you to say, Jaden?
So, like, I mean, I agree with definitely certain points of Connor's statement. Like, so Hugh Jackman, it seems like he definitely is like selfish, but he doesn't mean to be selfish. So, either way, if Izzy dies, he's either gonna feel guilt about not being there and working as hard as he can to save her, or he's gonna feel guilty about working hard and not being there. But like, if there's a chance of him saving her, like he hasn't accepted the fact that she's gonna die yet because he believes that he can save her. So like the 5 stages of grief, like he's not at acceptance yet. Like that hasn't happened.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the reason I think it's selfish is so there's a part where he gets like a phone call and Izzy's like, don't answer it, like come hang out with me. He answers the phone. There's a part where she wants him to like write the last chapter of like her manuscript, like this book she's working on, and instead of just doing what she wants, he's like get that away from me. He's like I don't want to talk about that. He's like you'll finish it because he's just I think he's really selfish. It's like all these things like when she's outside looking through the telescope and she's out in the snow. It's like immediately his response is like get inside. Like what are you doing out there? He has to be like convinced to join her. So that's why I think he's selfish. Is he never does anything that she keeps giving like suggestions and kind of ideas on what they can do together in her last little bit, and he's always like obstinate about all of them or just doesn't do them outright.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it selfishness. I would think it's misplaced priority because it's the same idea of him. He takes off his wedding ring and then loses it when he goes to surgery.
Right.
He's so concerned about the work. He's so concerned about the future that he forgets that he needs to live. And his gamble is that he will get more time to live if he plans for the future. And I think that's a fun way to put it. Because
that is good.
That's I just like, oh man,
I
gotta pat myself on the back for that one because I didn't write that one down.
I think the other thing, maybe this is why I tie it to selfishness so much, is because like wanting to be immortal, which is a big theme throughout this movie, I think is inherently selfish. So it's either you decide to be immortal and because you continue to live, now you're taking resources away from like the generations that are going to come after you. Or you choose to be immortal and you don't have any children to kind of like offset that, but now you're denying like new life to come into the world. So I think being immortal is just inherently selfish, and to me that's like a theme in this movie. So the fact that he's trying to stop death, and I think there's other themes in the movie that imply there's all kinds of stuff that it's called the fountain. It's because they think they're going to get to the fountain of life and be immortal.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that's why I tie so much of this kind of like selfish narrative that Tommy has to being selfish, is because he's trying to deny death, and that to me is like kind of an inherently selfish notion.
I think that the text doesn't say that. I think that the film says not that it's selfishness, but it's like I don't want pain. I don't want this pain for anyone. He's ignoring all of the people around him, hurting all of the people around him for this goal of universal suffering. He wants to fix universal suffering.
He describes death. He says it's a disease.
Yeah.
And he's going to figure out how to cure it. Like that's how he describes it himself. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I wouldn't call it selfishness as much as
the reason I think it's selfish is because he doesn't just do this out of just some kind of notion he has. He's doing this purely to save a person that he cares about and loves. Like that's why it's not. He's not just some single guy who's like, oh, I guess I'll just cure death today. He's not just some guy who just decides to do this. He's doing it for a reason, and that's why I kind of equate it to the selfishness.
Well, I'd actually even say that it's not about the immortality part. Isn't selfishness because he ignores the results of the first test of when the first compound. When that comes back, it's like, oh wow, he's testing like he's younger. Like you're getting neurological regrowth. He says no, our focus is tumors and abnormal growth. Like
right.
we're not gonna worry about that. Like that part is selfish because he's not trying to look to the future.
I guess that's
for everyone. He's looking more for his personal thing, and then once it gets to the idea of immortality or making people stop dying, it's an extension or a continuation of that same, like, I want to save Izzy, but now I don't want anybody to feel this pain. So that's why I don't think of it as selfish.
I guess I think that's a good point. That kind of counters what I'm going with, but I think that's like one time in the movie, and I just think I got more vibes of it just seems like he's doing this. It's this like facade that he's doing it for her and he's trying to save her, but it's like to me it's like in reality he's doing it because he doesn't want to live without her. So it is about him. To me, like that's what I take from it. So I'm cool with the other thing I think that I wrote down at it's towards the end where this is gonna be like him being future self, I guess. Do we want to get into that?
Well,
it kind of ties into what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Well, I guess yeah. Say like that's the thing. Like everything is connected.
It's tough. He says they're in the bubble and they're floating to Xibalba, that nebula, and he says like you'll blossom and I will live, which I wrote that down and underlined it because again and maybe that's just because my opinion of his character throughout the movie, I think he's doing it for himself because he doesn't want to live without her, is because he says like you'll blossom and I will live. Like it is that's why I think he's selfish. It is about him. He wants it for himself because that's what I took from it, and I could be wrong, and that's fine. But that's why I keep kind of circling back to that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's selfishness. That's the film being self-aware and saying the point. Everything is connected. Death is life because I mean we can talk about the ending when we get there because
I didn't want to jump too far
like,
ahead, but that just kind of I was in that same vein, so I just wanted to mention it.
Yeah. So.
What do you think about present day, like your Tommy? Like,
well, I mean, like I said earlier, he just I think he has a problem accepting his wife's death. It is inherently selfish, but he obviously doesn't mean to be selfish. Like he thinks he's saving her life, but the actions of trying to like stop death can be like it's just natural to try and stop it. It's your natural instinct. He thinks that he can, and he hasn't accepted Izzy is in the stage of her life where she's accepted death and she is okay with this. She's ready to go. And so there's this moral compass that you think that he should be there with her because she's accepted it. There's no way that he can save her. But that's not what's going on in his brain. His brain is, I have to do everything that I can to stop her. I just made this breakthrough. There's got to be something here that I can do.
Yeah.
It's just especially tragic when she dies
and then he missed a phone call.
They literally have the breakthrough like right when she died.
Yeah, and it's heartbreaking, dude. I mean, it is. And like I understand like it is selfish, but like in that situation, like I would also be selfish.
When I say selfish, and you say he's selfish, and doesn't mean to. That's what I mean. It's like it's not. I'm not saying he's consciously being like I'm doing this for me, and I'm conniving, and I have this secret plan to be like selfish, and I'm going to save her for myself. I don't mean it like that. I just mean like the acts. What he's doing is like it's like in and of themselves are selfish.
Well, it misses the bigger picture. He doesn't see himself in the bigger picture. He sees his story.
Like, I mean, he realizes it's what Izzy's trying to show him with the book, The Fountain.
Exactly.
That's all she's and like so the scene where she falls and she says she feels held.
Mm-hmm.
And then he immediately was like, "Yeah, I was there, Izzy. I held you." He doesn't like he's not getting what's going on with her.
Yeah.
And she kind of accepts that at that moment as well.
Yeah, she says, I felt full.
Yeah.
And
that line, that scene was great to me.
Yeah. Yeah. There's just so many things. Like, I don't think Rachel Weisz's her performance is particularly great in this film.
There's not a whole lot. There's not a whole lot of her in the movie, to be honest.
Weird. Yeah, I think she's I actually really like her a lot in it. Like I think of like the bathtub scene where he's like kind of washing her off, and she like makes a joke about how like who's the redhead or something because he's missing his ring.
Oh yeah.
And she makes a joke about him cheating on her, and he gets really upset. but she's just trying to make a joke, and then they like end up in the bathtub together, and I was watching, and I was like, what a like this seems like a real genuine couple who is like going through something really hard, and that was like a real genuine scene where I was like, this is like a lot of love going on here, and I I really liked the performances, and I bought them like hook, line, and sinker. I thought it was really great, and I thought Rachel Weisz's, especially that scene, was one like standout to me as like because again, I think it's like the beginning of her acceptance that she's gonna die because she mentions that she can't feel hot or cold anymore,
Yeah.
and she's kind of that's like her first big nudge to Tom is that she's like, I know I'm going, like, can you just be here with me now? And he is there with her now, which he's kind of not throughout the movie, and so I thought it was a great scene. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think Rachel Weisz is actually really good in this. I think it's a really good performance.
Yeah, and I love the snowball scene. I think there's a lot of real joy and real fun
Yeah.
between the characters that feels organic, especially the way it's shot with that camera back and off in the corner as it's staring at at the awning basically.
Right.
And Hugh Jackman throws or Tom throws snow at Izzy, and she gives like what feels like a really organic, like a goofy laugh.
Yeah.
I love that. But more what I mean is relative to the opportunities that Hugh Jackman is given to really express a wide emotional range, she doesn't have those as much.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's. Yeah,
I
it's
just think
definitely fair.
whenever
So
she's on
not
screen, yeah.
she's not on the screen enough to really have a bunch of character development.
But when
Yeah.
she is, I think she's great. Yeah. I think she's. I don't know that she's better or worse. I don't want to like compare her to Hugh Jackman's performance, but I think they're just both so good in this. Like, while I don't like track the story or love the story all the time, I enjoy seeing like they're just both great on screen together.
Okay, and then so I guess past then, what do we think of those characters or those actors in the past, and what do we think of the overall timeline in general?
So I mean, it was my idea. I don't know. I mean, could be completely off on this, but I think the past is just him reading the book.
Right. That's it. Right. Like you're the expert on this, Calvin. Because
Well,
that's what I think.
We'll talk about final theories at the end. I'm not gonna
Okay.
give
Oh,
you
okay,
the
okay,
takeaway.
okay.
Okay.
Okay,
So
I'm
that's
glad
the
you
way I
said
feel
that,
about
James,
it. Yeah,
because I
'cause,
think
like,
the same thing.
And I think she's. I mean, in the story is just. I mean, like, so there's a scene where there's a car driving and it's upside down, and then it flips to the car going forward, and then moments after that, there's a scene with the horse doing the same thing, and it's both like Hugh Jackman racing to get these things done to like.
I thought it was great. 'Cause
Sorry.
I made a note of that too because it's Hugh Jackman's character in both different timelines rushing to do something for either his wife Izzy that he thinks is important or like the Queen,
Yeah.
which his character in the past finds important, which is portrayed by
Yeah.
the same
Rachel,
person.
Yeah,
So.
Rachel Weisz. Yeah. So yeah, I just think that the book that she wrote is like trying to not only help him accept death, but telling the story of like what he's going through right now and what he's trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then
Yeah,
you're-
it's almost like it's as much a creation myth as it is a love story,
Yeah.
and I love that idea.
It is very cool. Yeah.
And I guess like the other reason I kind of think it's the book or whatever is, Izzy is talking to Tommy when she goes to the hospital after she's collapsed, and he's talking about how he's like they're gonna have a breakthrough, and she calls him. She's like, "Oh, my conquistador,"
Yeah.
and that's why that's like
Mhm.
again. I guess we can get into more final theories. I just think there's a lot of nods that, this is like kind of. I thought the book was the past, but anyways, I think it's neat there. I was reading that there's like kind of posture differences that Hugh Jackman was pretty conscious of. He wanted each of like his
So
different.
Tomas is the
Tomas,
the
yeah,
one in
it's the past one, right?
yeah, in the past.
But he wanted each character to kind of take on like a different kind of feel, different look. And so like when he plays Tomas, he's like more aggressive. He's very upright, straight posture. He's like very moving forward. And then when he's playing Tommy or Tom in the present
So
tense, he's like kind of more
Tommy
hunched.
is present. Tom is future. Tom or astronaut, you could call it that.
Oh, okay.
And then Tomas is the one.
The
in
only reason I keep
past.
saying Tommy is
Tom.
because that's what popped up in the subtitles when I had it on. So
Yep.
I keep saying Tommy for present tense, but we can
Yeah.
do that. That makes more sense. So Tom would be the future, the astronaut,
And
then-
Ellen Burstyn's character calls him Tommy.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, but Tommy's like more hunched over, and then
Mhm.
obviously the kind of future version has like a very kind of yoga poses and stuff like that.
Yeah,
He's
very sound
proper,
posture.
Yeah.
yeah. So they all kind of like take on like a different style, which I think is cool, and I think I definitely like picked up on that while watching it. I think they carry themselves differently. It's the same actor, but these characters are different still.
Mhm.
So like one scene I loved about like the past tense Tomas is when he gets stabbed. Like that felt like I had a lot of empathy in that scene. Like I felt like I was almost there with him because like just the camera view and like his acting in it, I was like, oh shit, like I'm scared right now. Like what happens? Like is this dude gonna die? Am I gonna see this through his view? And that scene hit me pretty good. I thought it was pretty wild.
I like when
I don't know
he
why.
like lifts his shirt up and looks at the
Yeah,
wound.
that was
like
it blew my mind, dude.
like
Like, that was wild.
I can't imagine being like a gunshot or a stab wound like that. It's
Yeah.
like that would be the first thing. I'd be like, oh my god, what is happening to my body
And
right
he
now?
just like
And,
pushes on it right away. And
Yeah.
he's scared for his life. And
Yeah.
I felt that in that scene, in that moment. I thought that was they done super well.
Yeah, he conveys that really well in that
Yeah.
scene. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's interesting too how the past deals with mythological traditions. So you have Mayan culture as opposed to the Christian Catholic tradition at the same time. And it's weird what the film I want to know what y'all think the film is saying here about Christianity versus like the Mayan myths.
Maybe the Mayans were more upfront about the bad shit that they did.
I think it's also like
That's what I would say. Catholicism is known for being sneaky and doing bad things behind closed doors.
Yeah.
I think it's more like maybe modern Catholicism, but I think like the roots of it are different. So like I think Christians and kind of that kind of culture is obsessed with like kind of eternal life. Like after we die, we go somewhere and we continue living, which again is like that's I think a theme in this movie is immortality, like this kind of idea that we get to continue going. Whereas the Mayan myth is that the first father, he sacrifices himself, like he kills himself to like create the earth. His body becomes the roots, and like his
limbs become the bloom and his head becomes Shababa.
what is it? What part of him becomes a spirit in the sky? Isn't there?
I can't remember what his spirit becomes.
I made a note.
Maybe
I'll find it.
the air.
But there was like he accepts death to the point that he's like he's fully gonna he knows he's gonna die. He's gonna do this for a greater purpose. Where I think like Christianity has this like it's very comforting to be a Christian because you can know that you're gonna die and go somewhere, and that's kind of a construct that we've made as human beings, and it's comfortable to believe that, and it's reassuring to believe that. Whereas I think the Mayan kind of that myth, it accepts death, and it sees death as what is it? He says it's like death is his awe or something.
Death is the road to awe.
Yeah, which is a great line.
Love that. Yeah.
It's like it's this really important purpose that this first father carries out, whereas I think that Catholicism kind of views death in a different way, where it's like death is just you getting to then go to heaven and continue living.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I think the Catholicism is portrayed poorly in this film, obviously because it's in the height of the Inquisition, but I don't think they're saying different things, which I think is kind of weird when you compare the tones, because the Inquisitor talks about how the flesh will decay, these bodies are prisons. Yeah, exactly. Right. So they're.
I guess you're right. I guess in terms of the movie, they are saying the same thing because he thinks it's like because he's like mad at the queen for wanting immortality.
Yeah, on Earth because our rewards are in heaven. We live forever somewhere else.
Yeah, I guess contextually in the film, what I said doesn't really make sense, but I think.
But I think that's what it feels like that should be the takeaway because of how he approached it. Like this is like when he takes out the map, another one of the Queen's lands for us, and he smears blood across it like it's a brain.
That's
like
a
all
great
of
scene.
Spain
Yeah,
is a brain, and he's just covering a new cortex.
There's
Shout
some
out to
visually
Nathan.
really.
I didn't see that one.
There's
but he saw
visually
that.
really good stuff in this. Like there's like
That part was gross.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's whipping his body because
Like
it's a prison.
Yeah, he's got like a cat of nine tails just
Literally,
going
like,
after it. Like
that scene came out, I was like, just stop.
yeah.
Oh my god.
Another like a little off track. Another visually like great scene, which I thought was CGI, was when he this is present tense Tommy. He's looking up through like a skylight because they're trying to figure out how to do this brain surgery on that monkey.
Mhm.
And he looks up, and it looks like kind of the Chibalba Nebula.
Yeah.
Like, and he sees it through like the skylight, and I
Like the
honestly
snow
thought
is
it was,
melting like around it, like that.
yeah.
That was awesome.
There's
yeah.
some really
Yeah.
visually great
I
scenes
wrote
in
that
this
one down.
movie.
I was like, that scene
Yeah.
is stunning. Like, that one
Yeah.
was done really well.
Yeah, and I do, and that is another one of those macro lens shots. It's just dropping certain
And they
chemicals
just
in there.
superimpose that on top of the film they already have, like for the skylight.
Yep. So that skylight is probably just like a green screen.
Wow.
taped over a window.
I love that. That's so cool to me.
Yeah,
That's
that is
amazing
cool.
how they did that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess do we have more to talk about Conquistador Hugh Jackman, or do we want to move on to future Hugh Jackman?
I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I really want to cover as far as the. I mean, well, what about, because the whole point we were coming back here was um, the the relationship between him and Izzy. So Isabel is
Right.
obviously
Yeah.
something we haven't talked about.
Just real quick. So like one thing that I noticed too is like his relationship with his guard or whatever, his soldiers that are with him, is similar to the way that he feels sometimes like, for his colleagues in the future. That he feels like they're betraying them. They don't have his back. They think he's crazy and he should be going this way.
And
Yeah.
I wonder if that's like if the interpretation is that this is a book that Izzy wrote.
Yeah.
I think that's a great
Yeah.
little thing. Like she is more aware of what's going on
Yeah.
around him than he seems to be.
Because he's just focused on the goal, and he's just like when any like when the woman doctor like she doesn't respond to him like what he needs right away. He's like, hey, after this, get the other monkey prepped.
I think she like tears her mask off, like she's so
Yeah,
upset.
she's so frustrated, and like his assistant or whoever he is goes and helps him, or she's like, I'll take care of it. Like
Yeah,
don't worry about
Donovan.
her. Yeah,
I
Oh,
think
I'm sorry,
that
not
stuff.
Donovan.
I think that stuff really parallels the past tense one, Tomas, because he has that Captain Ariel. I'm not sure.
Avidal.
That's-
Is that who you're talking about? Avidal, Father Avidal.
No,
no.
the guy played by
with the beard.
he's played by Cliff
Mm.
Curtis. He has like the head wrap on.
Yeah, I don't
He's
remember
like his
name.
second, but he does the same thing towards the end. He's like he's pushed us too far.
Yeah.
Like he's going too far, and I think that's the same way. I think Jaden's totally right. That's how his colleagues act. They're like he's going too far. Like he's not being safe about this. He's taking all these like he's making all these decisions without thinking about the consequences, which I think Tomas does as well, because he's willing to do whatever it takes to find this fountain.
Yeah.
And
He's lost sight of the priorities.
right.
It's the same. It's mirrored exactly in the from past to present.
I think all of them, when we get into the future one, I think they all really mirror the same guy, just kind of told in a different way. And that's why I like the theory of it being a book, like what you said, where she's more aware of how he's acting than he is,
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it like they mirror each other so well. I think that's really good.
Yeah. So I mean, so obviously Isabel. Do you like the fact that she's here? Does she help move the plot in a way that you find?
It's really, I don't want to say like contrived or boring, but it's like this guy is like so devoted to her that she could just say anything and he's gonna do it. I don't think there was a lot of like build up that went into him like going to find the fountain, because there was like he does say one line. He's what does he say? He's Father Avila.
Avidal, I thought.
Avila, whatever.
Or it's either Avidal or Avila.
Avila, yeah. That's what I have pulled up. It's Avila, Avila.
Yeah,
Father
you can
Avila,
correct me. I can be
Yeah, no,
wrong
no.
sometimes.
Which is great.
Sometimes.
He's played by Bark Margolis, who is Hector Salamanca from Breaking Bad. I was
Ooh.
really
Ding, ding,
excited.
ding, ding, ding.
I was really excited to see him in this because he's great in Breaking Bad, despite like never saying anything.
Yeah, he
Oh,
does a
yeah.
great job. Just his facial expressions is like some of the best acting I've seen on television. So
I love when he gets interviewed by like the police and he basically spells out. I can't remember what he says, but he's basically like "fuck you" or whatever,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's just like this long scene to like spell it out. He's great in that show, and he's great in this too. He talks about how they found the Fountain of Youth basically, and this dagger's got kind of like a map on it. It's going to lead him to it, and Tomas says he's like, "Oh, you giving us tales of pagan yarns," which I think is just a great line.
Yeah.
I made a note of it. I think it's a really good line. So like, I guess initially he doesn't believe in it, but then like, as soon as Isabella tells him to go and do it, he immediately just does it.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of any apprehension he has always just evaporates as soon as she says something. So I don't think there's a lot of like drama or tension between them because he's just going to do anything she says.
Yeah, and I think it's meant to mirror the purpose and the goal. Like it's that almost religious zeal that he has in the present.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, literally being in the past, taken from her. Like, because I love how he says when he charges at some point, like through her or by her word or by her grace, we will live forever.
Yeah.
And meant obviously for when we tie everything together, that'll make a lot more sense.
Yeah. No, and I think if you think of it as a book describing the way he's acting, it's like he's so cut off from like the rest of the world and what's going on that he's just going to do whatever she says. He's going to do whatever it takes to like find this cure, find this eternal life, which absolutely mirrors what Tommy's doing. He's going to do whatever it takes to cure his wife, and that's why I think there's like a really clear parallel between like it's sort of like a kind of a overbloated version of himself, like a more extreme version of himself in the past.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
like a caricature.
right, yeah. Overbloated was the wrong.
No,
Oh
the
yeah,
overbloated is the right thing, but I think yeah, what you're getting at is specifically a caricature of
yeah,
himself.
yeah. And so I think that's why I like the way he is in the past because it's like it's more extreme version of what he's doing in the present.
Like
Mhm.
he like so when the Mayans come out like in the beginning of the movie when they come down off the pyramid and there's many of them going compared to one of him and well he has two soldiers with him like no fuck this we're out of here like there's no way we're gonna die and he says anything for her and like there's zero chance that he wins this fight. I mean
Right.
he starts off pretty decent looking away he's got some hands dude he can fight
Yeah, yeah.
but I mean, at
Some
the end of the day,
adamantium
like,
bones.
yeah, he's got some skills. He's been through World War II, World War One. I mean, we've all seen them. But so like, yeah, I mean, he was just acting whack, man. You know, like in this scene, like there's no point. Like he's being crazy. Like he's an insane person. He's so driven towards this goal that it doesn't matter what the obstacle is, and I think it's just like an overblown, like portray.
Yeah, character
Yeah,
portrayal
yeah,
of
yeah,
that.
portrayal
Same
of
character.
him. Yeah,
I really like that you said that. It's like the odds are so against him. Like
Yeah.
he's absolutely not going to win, which is
Yeah.
essentially what the odds are against him in his present day.
Mhm.
Like he's not going to win. She's going to die, and that's such a good way to put it. It's like the beginning of the movie basically tells what the whole movie is about.
Yeah.
It's like it's
Yeah.
a guy who's doing something that he can never be victorious, but he's going to go through it anyways.
Yeah, and I love the very first few lines of the whole film. The two that he's with are staring at the long trap. They're like it's a trap.
I
And
I
they're
got
like,
so many like Raiders of the Lost Ark vibes from that. Like
Yeah,
that's
right?
exactly what it seemed like
yeah,
to me.
and he was like, yes, yes, it is. What are we gonna do? We're gonna break through.
Yeah.
And I love that he said breakthrough because we've had a breakthrough
yeah,
Yeah.
in the present, and it's literally meant to be, I think, an allegory of his scientific drive, trying to get something that he's being pressed upon by for Izzy in the present and Isabel in the past. There's no meaning behind it other than them giving him the goal to go do it, and so it's just blind faith. We're gonna go through it. It's very similar. Like there's a very small chance that he is able to accomplish his purpose, is what it says. And so same thing in the present. We're gonna keep working and working. There's a very small chance that I will be able to cure her tumor or live forever. But for him it's the journey because it's the motivation of the
Right.
journey.
Wow. Okay, I'm liking this movie more. The
yeah.
more we talk
That
about
keeps
it, yeah.
happening
Yeah.
when we keep talking about movies like this.
Like yeah, initially I was like, this movie's kind of okay. It's conceptually pretty good and the performances are great, but I was like, I didn't really buy the story that much. The more
So-
we talk, I'm like, wow, okay, this is really
so
good.
I liked it, and like one thing that you pointed out to me before we even watched the movie, you were like, it's only 96 minutes long, which I feel is a detriment to the movie. Like I mean, they do a
Mhm.
good job. Like don't get me wrong.
It is really short.
Yeah, but there could have been so much more content. In this. There could have been more, and I would have enjoyed a lot more Conquistador Hugh Jackman.
I
Like
think-
that's I mean I was a big fan of that.
I think
part,
that all ends
so.
up being like a budget thing.
Yeah,
And
I do.
considering
I mean,
considering kind
yeah.
of the trials this movie went through even to get made.
Yeah.
I assume the runtime is more a reflection of budget rather
So I
than
assume-
vision.
yeah.
Yeah, I get more sense out of it coming from Requiem of a Dream. There's too much hip hop editing. Things are too short, despite how how cinematic everything is. Then the way he's constructed so many scenes, like we didn't. There was one scene in I Am Sam that I found. That's a really interesting frame and picture, and that's something I like. I storyboarded that just on my my notes because it's like, oh, finally something interesting to look at. Those are everywhere. They're everywhere, but some of them only last like 2 or 3 seconds, and there's just a million of them that you just kind of get this sense that things are always changing and that things mean something, but you don't know what, and it's very hard to take in, especially on a first go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that, yeah, like I said, this was my first time watching it, so I wasn't really catching, or that wasn't my focus watching this. My focus was, again, like the characters and everything. But I do agree with you, like, when we talk about I Am Sam, and it's like, it's the filmmaking style is so distracting from the story, Whereas this, it absolutely enhances the story in every way.
Yeah,
It's so good.
It's
like
that
the whole-
concept of mise en scène. Everything within the frame
Right.
is curated specific for a purpose.
Right.
So not only did it like distract from the movie, it distracted from our conversation about what the movie was about in general. I didn't learn about anything discussing I Am Sam with you guys. I've learned already a bunch of things about this movie, like just having conversations.
Yeah,
right
no,
now.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
And I think if you're gonna make a film and your film is so distracting from the narrative, then you haven't made a very good film.
I think so too. Yeah.
And that's absolutely not what this movie is. It's done in a way that it is everything, every shot, especially the score that accompanies all these scenes is helps every scene so much. Like
Yeah.
there's like a different tone in the score when you're with like future Tom. There's kind of like a different sense when it's Tommy and Tomas. Like they all like play together to create like really great scenes. I think I really like the score in this. It's really good. But
Yeah.
do we want to? Are we done with Tomas? Or are we going to move to future?
Yeah,
Tom?
I think we're more or less done with Tomas because like Isabel just isn't that much. She's really just an archetype. Like,
That's it.
yeah.
She's just like a plot point. Here you go, move forward. And
Yeah.
like, that's what she's there for,
And I
which is
think-
okay.
yeah.
Like there's not an issue with that. There's not a whole lot of runtime here, so
yeah, because that's
we
what
don't
she is
need
in
her
the-
character developed because it's just a reflection of her character in the present.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. And it's
Yeah.
the same thing in the future anyway.
Yeah.
So
And I want to go
it's
through
like-
these characters, but I think it's always, especially with this movie, it's good to kind of get like what's their basic story out of the way first, because later on we'll talk about how they all tie in together. So I don't want to get into the tie in together immediately.
Right.
I want to explore like kind of what are they like individually. So
Yeah.
Tom is the future.
Yeah.
I read that it takes place in 2500. I don't know that they never specifically say that, so I don't know how you would. I don't know who got that, or if there's an interview with Darren Aronofsky where he says that. Maybe I missed it, but like
Yeah.
I don't ever remember there being a specific time where they said it.
So, the future self is what is the thing that makes me doubt my my thought that it's the book. Because like, when the fuck is this real? Is this happening? What's going on? Because I'm still a little bit confused about that. I don't know, and that's okay. That's what I hate you for, Calvin.
Count has a good question for us at the end. I
Yeah.
think it kind of makes you wonder like what part of what elements of the story should we be are real or should we focus on?
Yeah.
So, and I think that the future self really kind of lends itself to that.
Yeah, that's what makes me doubt. Like, it's part of the book. The past is just the future's. This is the future self presence in the movie.
Yeah. So I think that some people might have come up with a timeline. If you think about the tattoos on his
Right.
arm as being individual years,
Right.
and because when he says all these years as he's tattooing himself,
Yeah.
I think it's meant to be taken both figuratively and literally. That those rings are meant to connote a sense of time.
Yeah. Because I read that fact on like IMDb, and so that's just like people who kind of post stuff.
Yeah, because there's like fun facts. There's like a massive section sometimes.
Yeah, like the
and-
trivia stuff. And so I read it from there, and that's why I kind of take that one as a grain of salt, because unless the director came out and said it took place in this year, I don't know that I really believe it. I know I honestly, I didn't even really think of it as a future self. I thought it is
Ooh.
more of like kind of a spiritual version of himself that had nothing to do with time. It was just kind of maybe an outside perspective, like his own perspective, but taking a view from the outside of his story.
So yeah,
That was the character, and I didn't really equate it to any kind of time period. I just thought of it as like maybe like a mental picture he had created of this experience he's going through, where he has the tree that's supposed to kind of symbolize Izzy, and I never really equated it to being a certain time period.
So like so I did equate it to the future, but I did write down a note. It was like, this reminds me a lot of Aang and the Spirit Realm in Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yeah,
I'm like, this
okay,
is
yeah.
like very, very similar to that.
Well, just the way he starts out the first time. So the movie starts out with Tomas, like the conquistador, and then it cuts to him, like future Tom.
Yeah, screaming. You have the crossfade. Well, not a crossfade. You literally match on action, match on sound of Tomas screaming, and then Tom screaming.
Yeah, but then I think his character is like so different. I think than Tomas, because then he's in this like kind of yoga position, just kind of floating in space, and he's a much more peaceful, calm character than Tomas is. And then just, he's constantly like whispering to the tree, and he's like, I'll keep you alive, like. He's
Yeah.
very comforting kind of character. He's so different than Tomas is. But then again, it's like they have like the same purpose, like they have the same goal in all these
Mhm.
different timelines.
Yeah.
But the character's
you say
portrayal
his-
is so
what-
different.
Yeah, what would you say his purpose is in this one?
So he's trying to get to. I think there's some kind of notion that if he gets to Shibalba, it'll resurrect the tree. That's why I think that's why I mentioned the line like "You'll blossom and I will live." It's like the idea of this kind of they'll be together again, like she'll be living. Because I think he just kind of has, while he is in the future in that bubble with the tree, he has visions of Izzy, but it's only to kind of take him to the past. It's not like a literal Izzy with him. I think that kind of literal Izzy with him is the tree. So, but I think the actual purpose is kind of in line with what Tomas and Tommy are trying to do. Is the whole point is to bring life back to Izzy. Like I think it's a little different because Tommy, his wife is dying. Tomas is trying to achieve eternal life for Isabella, and with Tom in the future, the tree is like she's already dead, and he's trying to like bring her back. But I think essentially it's the same deal. It's like it's this eternal life. It's having his partner back with him and having a life with her. And so I think like the goals. That's why I think they all parallel each other really well. Is because the goal is still like essentially the same, just kind of told in a different way. So that's what I think his purpose is, like future Tom.
So I would say his purpose is the acceptance of death, because Tomas and Tommy. So Tomas ends life his life ends with him just trying to deny death to his last second. Like he's dipping into the tree and he's trying to save himself. And so Tom is the only one who's like, I'm gonna die. And he says that and he floats out of the bubble with the tree into peace, which is exactly what Izzy was trying to show him the entire time. And even at her funeral, that's what she says. Even for such a young person, she was so accepting. She was so ready for this.
I think that's a
that's-
little different though because that's sort of touching into the end and how the stories tie together. I mean, I think Tom in the future he's not accepting of death throughout his time in the bubble.
No, but he learns to, and that's his purpose.
Each person, I see what you're saying. I really like that because that's not something I realized. The way each story ends is so Tomas dies on accident. Tommy wants to cure death, and then Tom, the astronaut, just finally,
Astro-Tom.
yeah, just accepts his death.
Yeah.
That is so. It's literally the evolution of a whole character archetype from accident to intention to full acceptance of what death even is. Oh man, that is even me. I've seen this film 8 or 10 times, and that specific connection to me hasn't necessarily been made because the way I see the past, or I mean, I'm sorry, the way I see the present and the future, I see those as a continuation of the same character, but the way that they narratively end is definitely that way, and I
Yeah.
love that.
Which is done, and that's so cool because it's the same character, but it's three different ways, and that they all kind of coalesce together to like spell out like a really cool ending. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, it's really that's why this movie is so interesting. It's having all these different characters, but they're also the same character, and they reach a conclusion because they work together to reach it. It's really cool. It's really good.
almost simultaneously. Like even though, and I think that's the way that the film approaches time is that although these things are different timelines, they're different characters, they're different points of a life. Everything is connected in such a way that they're all happening at the same time.
Right.
Because that's the way it's more of an Eastern tradition of like Taoism or the way or like certain quantum theories about how everything is connected at the same time. Like the future isn't necessarily contingent on the past. The past is also contingent on the future,
Yeah.
and I think that's why it ends up being that way.
So, what are your thoughts on future Tom? What do you think? What do you think his purpose is?
The purpose of it is the entire aesthetic of the film.
Ground control to Major Tom. I can't help myself, dude. I'm sorry if I interrupt you, buddy.
No, it's perfect. But yeah, like it is the same. It's a continuation of the whole idea, the whole drive to keep Izzy alive and deny death or death in a conscious sense. The film keeps driving at the fact that everybody actually, but Tommy Hugh Jackman's character seems to understand it, or at least isn't fighting against it. Like he's like, when we talked about how one who's so young, she didn't go out kicking and screaming, and whereas like literally just before, when the tree died at the same time that Izzy dies, he's literally screaming and slapping the tree,
Yeah.
no, no, no,
No!
no,
Yeah.
no, and just
I
that
wanna talk about that scene.
gut-wrenching.
Um, I've been waiting to get to this part. So in Calvin's first episode, where we had a little interview with him, and we asked you like, what's one of your favorite scenes you've seen on film? And this is the one you were talking about, right? Where he's like,
Both of them actually.
yeah.
There's two very similar ones.
But yeah, he's yelling. Yeah, he's just heartbroken that this tree, which is now that I've seen the movie, I totally get why you picked this as one of your favorite scenes. It's really good. Hugh Jackman is amazing in this. His emotion in it, and I totally buy into the connection he has with this tree, and it's not just a tree. It's obviously like it symbolizes his like love for his wife, and it is his wife, and I totally buy that scene. I totally get why it's one of your favorites. It's really good. Like
Yeah,
I was excited when you brought this up as your favorite, because I was like, okay, cool, we get to see like Calvin's favorite scene, and and you did not disappoint. It's really really well done.
yeah. It's all of the elements of symbolism and emotion, and I mean, I think if you listen to the podcast at all, I have a really big problem with staying in the moment. Everything extends out into the wider array of human experience, of reality in general, and what even is the nature of reality to conscious beings, and our place within them.
And
So
you get off the rails, but I love it.
yeah,
I
exactly.
think it's great.
And that's that I need. That's why, like, I need to be grounded. But that's why I love films like this that are totally ungrounded, and they're just everywhere. And they say everything all at the same time. Everything's all interconnected, and it's just a beautiful way to look at life. Sometimes, like, all of these little things build up to create characters, and everything, even within the characters, they're all connected to other characters who are connected to. It's just branches and branches and branches, and when you start to look at everything as being universal, it all makes not more sense, but it all feels different.
Right.
There's agency, and there's a sense of warmth almost in allowing yourself to be a part of the wider picture, rather than focusing on yourself in your own personal journeys.
Right. Yeah. No. I just. I keep liking this movie more. I want to throw it on again. I think. I'm really excited to
Yeah,
see this one
absolutely.
again.
And we haven't even really talked about any of it.
So okay. So if we're moving on from Tom the astronaut, what's your next like discussion point? What are we doing now?
So I want to talk about the style. The style is so important. Let's just talk about lighting for the whole film.
I have a comment on the lighting, and this is not really like an important one. This is just it's gonna be an NTIP nitpick, just because because I've been in an operating room before. Like I've scrubbed in, and I've been in an operating room, and it is incredibly brightly lit because you're doing major surgery and you need to be able to see what's going on. And when the first scene where Tommy's doing surgery on the monkey, it's like so dim, and they even like call the light over, which is still not even that helpful. And again, I don't think that's not really the point, because the point is like kind of the aesthetic, the feel they want for the film, not being like actually like accurate on how you would be in an OR. But I made a note of that. I was like, this is not. I've been in an OR. It is so bright in there, and this is like it's like they have like one light bulb, like a lamp on in there. It's so dim.
Yep.
But I think like aesthetically, I think it all fits. We had talked about in I Am Sam. I think tonally, that movie doesn't know what it's doing.
Mm-hmm.
This movie has a clear tone, and it
Yeah.
has a clear vision that's being then displayed on the film. And there's never a scene that I don't think is cohesive with the scene that went before it or the scene that comes after it. I think it's a very specific style, and obviously like lighting and cinematography and the score all plays a role in that. And that's how I would describe kind of the feel or look of this movie. And it's all cohesive. It all makes sense for the film that it's in.
It's all purposeful.
tonally, it's all very like it all makes sense.
Hmm. And so what I meant more by lighting is let's track how the lighting changes. So the first scene in the past, everything's dark, black. They're in the Death Valley Gulch, whatever.
Yeah.
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Moonlight seems very realistic to me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And then we get to the future. Everything is black because he's still not near Shibaba yet. And then we get to the present, and just like you said, the OR is very poorly lit.
Yeah, I was gonna say dark is definitely.
Yep.
If you want to describe the lighting, dark is absolutely the whole, and that's why. Just bringing that up again. It's all cohesive, even though they bounce around from these different timelines. It all makes sense because it's all the same tone.
Yeah, because it's a reflection of our perspective of each one at the same time. When that is there, this is the same thing as what's happening here. And it's so what happens is as the ship gets closer to Shibaba, you'll notice the lighting actually gets brighter. The lighting in the laboratory gets a little bit brighter. We also I mean in the present, we also, like, when he first gets home, it's night, everything's black. And the day comes up, but there's blinds and everything. So there's like this muted lighting that kind of adds a little bit of warmth. But we're not to Shibaba yet. And as we get to Shibaba, light gets brighter and brighter, and ultimately culminating in when he attacks the doctor. Izzy dies. And he attacks the doctor and throws him up against the blinds, and the blinds break, and he's confronted with the light, which is symbolic of Shibaba, because that's why everything keeps getting brighter. So he is confronted with the truth, the harsh reality of death.
I actually hadn't caught that. The main part of the lighting that I caught is definitely when Tom gets to Shibaba, and like it's so bright, like all the colors like washed out of it. It's like it. I actually, at first, I thought, I was like, wow, did they not realize what they were doing here? And it's like, after a minute, I was like, okay, it's clearly like intentional, because the rest of this movie has been so intentional, so why would the end not be? But I was actually like, oh my god, the lighting's so bad in this. Like, I was like, everything is washed out. It's just like a white screen almost with like, you can see some eyes in it. But it's, the more I got into the scene, I was like, okay, this is intentional. And I actually didn't pick up on the other timelines picking up in terms of light, because I guess you could also say that when Tomas gets to the end of his kind of story, he confronts the warrior at the top of the temple, and he has a sword on fire, which would, I think, to me, could be the light. And then also when he gets to the tree, it's daytime, whereas the whole kind of initial fight takes place in the middle of the night. So you're right. I guess I didn't equate those or like kind of match those up together, but that's a really good point. I hadn't noticed that.
So, like, as far as I saw the lighting, so like it goes along the basic lines of the acceptance of death. So when he's kind of like going to his past self mentally, when he's in like near Shibaba, or whatever, when he's in space with the hairy tree, so he decides there's a point in time. So and I noticed this first when he's Tomas and he's speaking with Isabella or Isabel. Everything is bright around her. She is just this, like, there's a scene where it's like just all white around her, and I think she represents the acceptance of death. And then when he finally decides to go back in the past and decides to not go into the OR and go out and see the first snow with Izzy, it's super bright out there because you see the snow and everything's reflected off of it, and it's super bright. And at that moment, he's starting to accept it.
She had always seen.
And then he leaves the tree, and it gets brighter there as well. And I think that's all kind of like the lighting, like, is as much as part of the story as anything else here.
Yeah. Boy, oh boy, I love that.
Yeah.
That's a really good.
There's
that's
more.
Really good take.
And there's more lighting stuff that's also fun. And you notice not only did he attack the doctor and he knocked the blinds off, think of the number of times he hit a lamp. There was one where he was sitting on the bed and he throws his hands.
I do remember that one. Yeah.
And that one fell. He's also in his office one time and hits the one that's spinning because he doesn't want to be confronted by the light. And another fun visual thing is the stars. As the stars get brighter and they get closer to Shibaba, and those are in other places, they visually represent that in one time in the office. At the same time that he hit the swivel desk lamp, there's track lighting above him that's just like the stars. It's the same color. And when he gets to the throne room and he's going to see Isabel, he walks through Just like it's just like one shot where it shows the bubble spaceship going through space with all the lights behind
Oh
it,
yeah,
and you all of those candles are lit, and they're the same color and tone as
yeah.
the, and it's just
Those are
like
great shots. Like
Yeah.
they,
it's so they're great on their own, and then the fact that they're mirrored in another
yeah.
timeline just for the sake of it, like they're not. It's it's
Like
just
nothing
another
in
layer.
particular is happening in those scenes. It's just kind of the bubble floating through space, and that's again that's why I really think the score is so good in this because it just nothing is necessarily happening in the scene in and of itself, but seeing that like bubble float through the stars and then it has this great score behind it, it conveys so much like emotion and it just really like keeps in line with like the tone of the whole film, and it just like you're just watching essentially nothing happen, but it's just like it keeps you in the moment. It keeps you in this film all the way. Like that's what I'm saying. So much of this film is just so cohesive.
Yeah, and oh, I'm sorry. Wait,
I wanted to say something. I want to get this on my chest, and it has nothing to do with the film. It's not the film's fault. Every time we keep saying Shabalba, I think of that movie Road to El Dorado. It's like the DreamWorks movie.
The movie's awesome.
yeah,
It's great, but like
why is Shababa in that?
so they have like this sort of like whirlpool like in El
They're,
Dorado.
they're also Mayans. And stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And so like so the two like Spaniards show up and they think they're gods or whatever, and they're given all this treasure and they don't know what Shabalba means. And so the kind of like the chief in charge of everything, he's like, to Shabalba? And they're like, to Shabalba! They're all like excited about it. And they just start dumping all this gold and treasure into Shabalba, which is like this whirlpool, and it takes people away. And it's the same thing. It's like this like death god type thing, or it's the end of time. It's the end of life. And that's what I think of. It's not a detriment to this movie. I saw Road to El Dorado before I saw this, so when I hear the word Shababa, I think of that movie. And so this is supposed to be a really serious film and has like really serious topics it talks about. But every time we say Shababa, I think of that movie. So hopefully, like after talking about this enough, I can associate that word with a better film. Not that Road to El Dorado is bad, but
That's
I
funny.
keep thinking about that every time.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So we finished up. We moved on from lighting. What's another thing you have?
Yeah, so lighting, I think we pretty much covered most of those. The way all of the shots are constructed, they're all either tracking shots, dollying shots, pans. They're all meant to look like journeys. They're all set up in such a way that we're moving through a space just like a journey. We're following the spaceship through the stars. We're following Tomas as he's walking through the room. We're following Tommy as he's walking on a street in Canada.
I think
We're
one
following
of the
someone down a hallway.
right. I think probably one of the best shots. I think that is like it's a zoom in on Tomas when the Inquisitor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The Inquisitor. They're about to like put all those people to death, and he's talking about how, like the flesh is a prison and everything, and
Mhm.
it's just like really long zoom that starts kind of behind the Inquisitor, and then it keeps moving forward, and then
yeah.
Tomas like shows up in the window, and his plan is to like kill the Inquisitor. But I like that is in terms of like you saying like film technique, film techniques used to like tell a journey or like a story. Like that's one that's really great. It's just like really kind of long scene where it's like you're you're going through it, and now you're arriving at like kind of the conclusion where it's like this is Tomas like trying to carry out like a goal that he has, and when he pops up into the frame and then he brings the crossbow up and you think you're about to reach the conclusion of it. I think that's you're so right. So many of these shots are so purposeful, and they are meant to convey something, because there's really not like, besides like the Inquisitor talking in the background, there's not like a ton going on here. It's just like the focus is totally like on the camera work and what is showing up in your frame. It's not necessarily the dialogue that surrounds it. It's all about what you're seeing. And yes, I think you're so right. Like there's really great shots that just tell their own story in and of themselves.
Yeah, and there's another one that's it's the same technique, but I don't think they're necessarily connected. But when Tommy first gets home, and it's zoomed in on that painting of the temple, and
Right.
it zooms out, and it's you hear all of the jungle noises, and they slowly fade out as the color fades out, and then you get introduced to the foyer. And I thought I like that it's a similar technique, and it's represented somewhere else as well, just for the sake of it. I don't think they're connected quite the same way symbolically like some of the other ones are, though.
It's not like a motif or anything, something that is like a recurring thing we're seeing, but I definitely think that it's all purposeful and they're great shots.
Yeah, yeah, and there's also when he's going up the elevator to see Izzy, you can hear the spaceship bubble
Yeah,
noises,
yeah.
and it's meant to be the same exact thing. Us the spaceship hurtling up through space. It's another
Yeah,
representation of
that's
another
great.
journey.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
noticed the sound. I didn't like equate it to that, but that's a good way. Yeah, I like the way you put that. That's really cool.
yeah. So all of the camera work is just yeah, I just love how all of the style is self-referential. Like that's what I think is a hallmark of a good film is when everything relates back to something very specific as a message even. It doesn't necessarily need to be, but when it does and it works, I think it's just that much better.
I will
Because
say I think yeah.
it will work subconsciously and then when you pay attention to consciously, it's that much more fun.
Yeah. No, I really like that. I guess I want to I can't remember if it's slow motion through this or not. And it was a scene that just kind of felt like not like almost melodramatic. Like it was kind of too over the top for me. That I don't think it's probably the one scene I think doesn't super fit maybe with the rest of the movie. It's when Izzy kind of collapses. She has like a does she have a stroke? What she have?
Seizure.
A
Yeah.
seizure. That's
Yeah,
it.
she
Yeah.
has a seizure. Yeah.
That scene to me was like that one was a little overplayed because like Hugh Jackman walks away and she's still standing there, and you can tell like kind of the way the music builds, like something's gonna happen. And I think the rest of the movie is so much more subtle with like how it sets up its tension, and this one was like so obvious. So I guess in terms of like filmmaking and the way the scene is set up, that was maybe the one thing that I thought was kind of out of place. I'm not saying the scene shouldn't be in the movie. I just think it was executed in a way that maybe didn't like totally fit in line with the rest of the film to me.
Yeah, I think maybe tonally. Well, there was one of the slow-mo scene when he's running into Izzy's room and she's dying, and there's a weird zoom. I don't like that shot. That one feels more out of place to me than this
Yeah.
one. But the what she does when she looks up, she sees Shabalba.
Which is so great because that totally I brought up like when Tommy looks up through the skylight, and it's like that same sort of like the snow melting, and it's Shibaba again, and she does the same thing. Like that's again, it's like that's why I can't have too many knocks against this movie because everything just ties in so well together. And yeah, I totally caught that. I was like, oh, it's the same thing, and it all like interweaves and works so well together that like I can't really like knock that scene too much. But
Hmm.
I just thought like maybe kind of it was a little too dramatic
Yeah,
for the way the rest kind of the film is. It's so like it's so concise in how it uses its tension and drama, and that one was kind of like over the top. I think like
yeah.
maybe too intentional.
Yeah,
But
exactly. And it's also that part is actually reflective of so we talked about the dollying, all of the camera movements, but there's those and then all of the stationary camera work that they have too. You have three real main stationary camera type shots. You have a lot of close-ups. You have the rooms. Almost all room shots are if the camera isn't moving in it, they're set back in a corner, almost like a security camera. Um, and I don't think that there's anything visually like necessary for those. I don't think they really mean anything. But then you have an abundance of top-down shots. And I think we see enough references of characters looking up and seeing Shabalba that the top down thing is meant to be symbolic of this kind of shroud of death over all of us, looking down, and when you look up and see the light as we're all moving towards it,
yeah,
it's meant to it. There's a lot of tie in like there's a top down shot of when Tomas is kneeling at Isabel's feet and it's the same and the crest underneath their feet is the same crest underneath Isabel's or Izzy's bed like when she dies.
yeah.
There's a top down shot of that as well.
And Jade had mentioned like there's two top down shots that kind of like well I mean they like start upside down and then go right side up, but it's still someone. It's the camera's placed high and looking down at your character. I think also the when I said they're in the OR when I complained about it not being lit correctly,
Yeah.
that's a top-down shot.
Yep.
It is, yeah. That's a good way to put it. It is this kind of like because again, this I think this movie is all about like death and how we deal with it. So the idea of like almost like death being the character behind the camera that is looking at this story take place, um, and so you kind of get that perspective without like really realizing it.
Yeah,
I think it's
yeah,
really good.
exactly.
Yeah,
And it's good that I think it's really poignant that you say death as a character because that's the driving message I think. You know, it's death isn't as much a destination even though we're all moving towards it as much as it is an act or just something that's always happening. You know,
Yeah.
whether or not we feel it or experiencing it doesn't mean that it isn't happening and life isn't still continuing on beyond our death.
When I think your two characters in this movie have death, they view death completely different. And I think that's why I think death is like a character in this, is because the way Izzy is experiencing her own mortality is totally different than the way Tommy is experiencing mortality. And I think I think you are right. Like that is the point, is like, how do we view it? How do we deal with it? And your two main characters in this are viewing it completely differently. All right, so I think we've moved away from that. What's another topic you have to go over, Calvin?
I mean, the other thing then, so we've moving away from a lot of the camera techniques. The symbols that are represented over and over, trees and rings, the light. Obviously, we already talked about.
I know
but
that I mentioned to you earlier that I said hair is like, I mean, I guess it's not a symbol you said, but it's occurring very often in this, and like the sound of it, the feel of it, I mean, everything is
Yeah.
very much tied into
It shows
the
up in
story.
like kind of that altar. It has like kind of the hair inside it,
Yeah.
and then
The
at one
altar?
point,
So
it's
that's
like,
why I
it's
said
like
you
a,
said it was like a stone of Shabalba or something like that.
it has a
like
name.
that.
It starts with an M. I looked it up and then I forgot it. You know, like it's like that little staff thing. It has like the cross, and then inside of it there's hair.
It's not hair.
It
That's
is.
just the way the light is. You're talking about the queen's crest, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's hair inside it.
No, it's not hair. It's just the way that little thing is shaped.
I
It's
looked.
the way the light is.
I looked up and it said it's hair in it, and then it said at one point, because at one point it changes and it's sort of like this sort of amber-looking thing, and I looked up that that's bread inside it, and they're supposed to mean different things.
What? Man.
Are we talking about the same? I feel like
Yeah, we're talking about this. There's a stone at the center of those crests. I
one of
just
them is
never.
hair.
I've never seen anything inside. Man, if there's something finally for me to discover.
Yeah, no, there's Jaden's right, because I made a note of it too. Like,
Yeah.
you know, when it's like the movie first starts and Hugh Jackman, he like kneels down, he like smells like the ring,
Yeah.
and he's looking up at like this sort of like, it starts with an M. It's sort of, it's, I don't know what it's called, but it's
I
like
mean, are you talking about a mandala? Because that's the only M that I can really think of.
No, it's like that golden thing, and it has hair inside it. It absolutely has hair inside it, and then it has something different inside it, and then it has hair inside it again. I didn't know what that was supposed to mean. I was hoping you'd explain it to me. So
I might be coming up short here because I'm not.
No, that's good because again, like you said, you've watched this movie a bunch of times and you can discover something new about it. So that's cool. We can move on from that because I
Yeah,
didn't
well,
get
I
that
know.
either. So.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that one because it's representative. The outline shape of it is Shibalba and the tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I get that. That makes sense.
So that's important. The reason I say it is the tree and Shibalba is because when Tomas finally gets to the tree of life, it's lit. It's the tree is backlit, and it is shaped like Shibalba, like the nebula. So that's why I say those are recurring and the same. And same thing with the tumor growth patterns. Those are the same. And they're just
Neat. I did not know that. So I definitely did not know the tumor parts. That's pretty cool.
when
Yeah.
they're metastasizing on the screen.
Yeah, it does.
It's
It
wild.
mirrors that. That's pretty cool. Which I guess would make sense because Shabab was supposed to be like this kind of your end, your death, or whatever, and the tumor is clearly what is killing his wife, and so it makes sense that it would like mirror that same look. That's
Yeah,
I like
exactly.
that.
But it's interesting that it also mirrors the tree of life because that's where you get your whole full circle, everything.
So I guess one thing I don't get. So Tom, the astronaut, is going to Shapalba because he thinks it's going to bring her back to life.
Yep.
So, but isn't Shapalba supposed to be like kind of like the underworld, like death?
Yes.
So why would that even be a thing that he thought would work?
I'm trying to remember. I think
Because again, I like that line where he says like he's like you'll blossom and I'll live, and so like obviously some part of this is in his mind somehow it ends up with them being together forever or something. I guess I didn't understand why he thought that because they kind of play on the fact that Shabalba is like death.
yeah, I can't really remember. I can't remember if the movie says it or if it's just implied as a symbol or because then it's a plot hole and I think it's fine as a plot hole. It's not very satisfying.
And maybe I need to
but-
do more research on Shabalba itself. Like maybe it's not death, maybe it's more of like a this kind of like recursive thing where it's like you have to experience death and then you come back, or maybe it's supposed to be like kind of a not necessarily like the underworld like Hades or anything like that, but it's supposed to be like a uh, an end and then a beginning again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
They mentioned like it's the underworld or whatever in the movie, but they don't say it's not like an ominous thing or anything like that. I can't remember exactly in detail what it is, but it doesn't seem like it's a bad thing. It's a good thing that that's where you're supposed to go.
Also, that word is spelled with an X. What
Yeah.
the fuck is going on with that? Like,
Yeah. It's annoying that the subtitles do it with an sh, but it's an X.
yeah. When it popped up, when I searched it, I was like, what? Why
Because
do you
it's,
spell it that way?
Because it's cuatl is the old Mayan language. I think that's how you pronounce. I think that's.
I
the
trust you.
language I'm
You and
thinking of.
you tend to know more about language than any of us, so I trust you.
I do love those, but yeah, the X's start a lot of.
Its
more
translation
words.
is place of fright.
Oh, interesting.
So that's why I kind of didn't really get. I think in the context of the story, I guess you can have Shababa be whatever you want it to be, but I guess
Yeah.
like in the literal like the myth itself, I wondered why they used Shababa as kind of a way of life for her at the end.
Yeah, I guess I see what you're saying. That like there's no reason that he would be going there in the first place because it's not explained. It's just kind of assumed that he's figured out a way. I mean, the other thing too is the tree is alive. So maybe what he was doing was he was taking like her corporeal body to Shababa to regain her soul.
Yeah, I don't know. That's.
I would say that's probably the best interpretation you're gonna get, at least right now.
Right. Yeah. No.
'Cause
I
clearly
get that, yeah.
clearly I've missed everything in
No,
this film,
dude,
and I don't know what the fuck
I
I'm
threw
talking
you a
about.
curveball, man.
Because I don't know about the Queen's Crest things being in there. Like I feel like an absolute fool now.
No, dude, you're doing great. But no, I just thought that was like kind of a. I wouldn't call it a plot hole because you could just explain it away in the context of the story. Like you could just say that Hugh Jackman's character somehow knew, like that was, and maybe it's not even that he knew. Maybe it's just that it was so important to Izzy that he was going to carry out this journey regardless. And maybe there wasn't really maybe he didn't know. Maybe he just had so much conviction, which his character is full of. All three of them are just have so much conviction that he was just going to carry this out no matter what. And it didn't really matter if there was like a rational or like a explained reason for it. So it could just be something that I just was confused by, and it doesn't really change the story at all. Like
No, it doesn't.
to be honest, so it's yeah.
It's
I
not
said,
like it's not like a plot hole that
yeah,
like
it's a
it
nitpick.
begs
It's
the
not like a
question.
yeah. It just was like I was just wondering. I was like, did I miss something where they said that it would bring her back to life, or is he just doing it kind of out of like a sense of duty to like his wife who was like researching and fascinated with like Mayan culture, and so he like carried this out kind of for her anyways, which I think is good either way.
I'm pretty sure. So she's talking about someone that she met doing research, and she says, "My father's not dead
The
because
guide.
he planted
It
a
was
seed."
one of the guides.
Yeah, and he's not dead because he planted a seed, and he is the trees, he's the grass, he's the air, and all this stuff. And I
And then
think
like the bird eats like the fruit of his
Yeah,
tree, and now
exactly,
he's
yeah.
flying with the birds. Like
So,
that's such a great. Like,
maybe
I
he
love
like
that story.
so Hugh Jackman maybe took the tree by itself to harness just that life power or something. I don't know.
yeah, I don't-
yeah.
yeah. That's
And
a,
it's okay. Yeah, I mean it never stuck out to me when I was watching the movie. That's for sure. I was way more interested in like other things that were going on.
oh yeah. To be clear, it didn't take me out of the movie at all.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, why are they? Okay,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
fine.
Yep.
Because
Um,
it's never explained, and it's not necessary because you're so engrossed by the aesthetics of those scenes, and then engrossed in the narrative plot lines of the other ones. There's not really like it's more of like a mental landscape. Anyways, which is why like what you were saying, like it's like his spiritual self.
And I think like that Tom the astronaut is so kind of like his kind of storyline is so ambiguous just in general.
Because it's also
so I don't-
reflected, like it also it blurs the lines between the at least the present. You know, Izzy shows up, but she's like a ghost.
Yeah.
And I think my favorite scene, like we were talking about, the one where he's like, leave me alone. It's this divine irony of we're living in the present, we're going to the future, but we're haunted by the past all at the same time. And it's like, how do we make decisions at all when we have all of the weight of the universe and the weight of our individual lives is so strong? How do we even deal with the weight of the universe?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a little a little issue I had, but it yeah, like you said, it has nothing to do with the narrative. It doesn't change anything about this movie for me.
Yeah.
What else you got?
And then rings.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Because he keeps losing. Well, he loses his ring.
Yeah, Tommy loses his wedding ring.
Yeah, and that's I think I mentioned earlier. Like, Izzy makes a joke like, "Oh, like,
Yeah.
is she a redhead?" She makes like an infidelity joke, which I think is, again, I just really love that scene. And then he keeps noticing it's gone. I think in like really important times. So like he's doing this research and he's in his Tommy's in his office, and they're kind of. It seems like they're sort of closing in on a cure, but like it's not quite because like it doesn't change the tumor size. It just kind of is like this kind of rejuvenates life or whatever.
Yeah, there's no change in the tumor, but all of I mean, I'm assuming that they're talking about the neural activity,
Yeah.
and telomeres being regrown.
It's like a
And so
cut
he's-
in his head that's completely gone too.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's like he realizes his ring is off, like at that point. So that's another like I think pivotal point in like his development as a character. It's like he is so close to like this cure, and he's so close to achieving his goal. Doesn't quite get there, and then there's the realization again that like his ring is gone, and he like tosses all like the papers off his desk. He
And
gets
hits
really
the
upset.
lamp.
Yeah, and hits the lamp. So I think that kind of the reference to the ring always comes up in like these really important moments and like these tragic moments, like in terms of his character. So it's like yeah, so he realized he isn't gonna. This isn't a cure yet. He's not quite there, and so that's tragic for him. And then after Izzy actually dies, is when his ring is off again, and that's when he starts like kind of tattooing himself with the pen and ink that he got from Izzy as a gift. And I think like the whole ring, kind of that tattoo, like that aesthetic continues as he keeps tattooing himself, which is cool because it's the same pen. Like future Tom is using the same pen that Tommy got as a gift from Izzy
To finish her story.
Yeah, and so it's like I think the rings on his arm are clearly like a continuation of the ring tattoo that he gave himself, and he just continued to do that. It's like it always seems to me like it's like some kind of important moment in his life is when this realization of the ring is gone.
Yep.
And so it's like maybe over all these eons that he's been traveling to Shabalba, he's remembering other moments because he keeps like eating the tree to kind of I think remember these things. That's like how I took it.
I thought it was to elongate his life.
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah.
oh, okay. I didn't think about that at all.
Yeah.
I always thought of it as like maybe he's trying to relive these memories, and so
So-
maybe every time he does it, that's when he gives himself another tattoo because he experienced something again, and,
I didn't-
and so he tattoos himself the first time at this tragic moment, and every time he relives this tragic moment by going back in time to remember it, he tattoos himself again. Like that's what I took from that.
So like the only reason why I think the tree like I didn't necessarily I just thought it was weird that he was eating it before, but when you said when you reminded me of the line he says you will blossom and I will live, I think that he's surviving. He's living, I think eons or a very very long time in this bubble by consuming the tree and using her life force because the tree, I'd imagine, has the same properties as the tree they found in the middle of the
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
There's a
Amazon that's
picture of
keeping- Yeah.
There's a picture of
Yeah.
it when they go and get the sample.
Yeah, he's consuming it to keep his life going, and like I don't like the rings around his arm. I assume simulates time, just like rings in a tree. Like that's what I thought was like. So he has his first ring. That was kind of his first life that he lived, and then he's like lived other lifetimes. I thought was the other rings
Whoa,
were
okay, I
marking
like
towards
that.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're both right. It is both a continuation of the ring on his finger and a visual connection to rings on a tree. That he is both connected to Izzy in the past and this tree here, like physically having tree rings.
I
given
never-
life by it.
That makes total sense that it would be the same because I knew it was the same tree. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, why would they have brought up that first tree in the first place if it wasn't the same one?
Yeah.
But it never occurred to me that it was like a way to sustain himself.
So I think it's a different
Ah.
tree. I think it's the seed that was planted on her grave that became that tree. And that seed
Holy
became
fuck, that's
that
so
seed came
good.
from the first tree, and he planted that. That's why the tree is Izzy.
I actually didn't. I didn't catch that at all in that scene because I was
Yeah.
kind of confused by that.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I guess this is.
That's probably the weakest part of the whole film is how the last 5 minutes wrap up.
But I guess just the way they cut from him eating the bark off the tree, and then it always is then continues into him being Tommy after that, and so that's why I thought the tree was like his means of time travel, I guess.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even. That's the thing is, I don't even really think this is a time travel movie. I think it's like a.
No, I
he's
don't
just
think so
he's just
either.
having memories. I think I don't know if I read a synopsis or I heard that it's him traveling back now, because I don't even think it's that. I think it's like reliving memories.
Yeah, it just says three. I think the synopsis usually just says 3 timelines or 3 time periods.
Maybe
Yeah.
that's why I equate it to like time travel.
Yeah,
But
because that's
yeah.
normally.
But
what
that's
we
a really
get.
good idea that the tree is to sustain him and keep him alive during this, rather than what I thought where it's like a means to like relive these memories, because that makes way more sense. I actually like
Yeah.
that a lot.
And it also goes back to the story where Izzy's talking about her guide and his dad being buried.
Oh, the
and
tree,
a
yeah.
But
seed
he's not
being
dead.
planting,
Yeah.
and he grows into the branches and into the seeds.
And that's
Yeah.
why the hair on her neck stands up the same way that the hair on the tree does.
Yep,
when
it's
speaks
meant to be a
her.
visual representation that these things are the same. That's why they're actually there's one scene where he's actually running his hand down the bark.
It's
and
gross, by the way.
Yeah, well, and then it cuts right to her body as he's
Yeah.
rubbing his hand.
Yeah,
over her.
I was proud of myself. I caught that like right away, because I think a lot of people be like weird hairy tree.
I was like weird space hair, hairy space tree. Like,
Yeah,
I was-
I caught that
what
right
the
away. I
fuck
was
is
like,
this?
because I even thought to myself, I was like, that's like what someone looks like when like the hair stands up on the back of their neck or
Yeah.
something like that.
Mhm.
And then there's literally a scene later where I don't know if I'm using match on action
I'm
right,
pretty sure I made
Yep.
like
but it's
Yeah.
it's the hair on the tree stands up, and then it cuts to the hair on like the back of Izzy's neck standing
Yep.
up when Tommy's like saying the same stuff to her. He's like, I love you, like I'll keep you alive, like, and it's the same thing he's been saying to the tree the whole time. I was actually really proud that I was like, that's hair on someone's body standing
Yeah.
up, not it's the tree. Yeah, it's hairy to represent that, but it's not like a gross hairy tree. It's meant to represent like being close to someone, and
that
like,
means that he
yeah.
was basically eating her flesh too, which I also found unpleasing.
It is, yeah. That's
Yeah.
that's interesting take too. Well, that's why I liked it, because I think that also plays into why I think he's selfish. Is like he's now that you've said that you think it's like he's consuming her to stay alive.
But to save her, I think is the end goal.
And
But
it
it-
goes
but it is
and it
like-
goes back to the beginning where he charges as a conquistador and says, "By her grace, we will live forever," or with her, through her,
Yeah,
whatever he said, we will live forever, and that's why it's interesting.
yeah. No, it's great.
But we're talking about rings, and there's more rings to talk about.
Yeah, this movie's hard to not take off onto. There's so many different dynamics and trains of thought that this
Yeah.
can go into in
I-
every single scene.
and
you
it's
talk
tough too
about.
because everything just ties in so well together, so
Yeah.
it's easy to get off track.
I
so
think
what
we've
other
done a fantastic job of staying on track so far.
what
I mean,
other rings do you have?
So I know
the-
there's the one that Isabel gives him.
Yep, the past, and that's
Yeah.
and I think the rings they're extensions of that same drive. They're literal representations of his goal, of his journey. And so when he drinks the sap finally, which was apparently like it was just icing, it was like glaçage.
It looked like something else, and it was
wondering- I
gross.
was like, oh, I don't love
I was
this.
like,
Like,
yeah.
I was like, this
I thought it
tree
was-
just came just
I
now.
thought I kept thinking like, oh,
the seed of life.
they just-
Yeah, that's probably.
that's
oh my
probably
God. Carl.
it's probably
I think
symbolic
Carl
for
Jung
that,
is
yeah.
calling me right now.
Yeah, dude, you're so right. I thought it just looked like
The
white
tree
paint.
is a dick.
Just looked like white paint to me. And I was like,
Yeah.
this is not aesthetically pleasing. I didn't like love that part of it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
why
but-
didn't they just make it
I
sap
think
colored?
it was supposed to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
the whole scene was.
But he drinks the sap, and then he's about to put on the ring because he finished his journey.
And
Yeah.
now I
That's
could
what
live
he thinks,
eternally.
but he
Isabel.
drops it
Yeah.
because that wasn't the point.
Yeah.
He missed the point and dies and is resurrected then as plant life.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
want to just quickly. So a bit of the sap drops on the ground and a plant sprouts out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a scientist, but I'm just saying, like, just deductive reasoning. Why would you then consume it and
It
not
creates
assume that you're
life.
also going to become a plant after that?
I
Like,
think it's interesting to think that like okay, well if it falls on plant life, other plant it will.
I-
he
I-
tests it
plant
on
growth.
himself first because he's gonna die.
I guess
either
he does
way.
put it on
Yeah,
his wound
and he
first.
puts it on a wound and it bubbles up and it
But
goes
isn't
away.
that, isn't that the first flower to pop out is from his wound?
No, the
No.
first one is on the ground.
No, after he's like consumed it.
Yeah,
the
yeah. 'cause
first
it's
one
the
that-
first thing that touches him, and then his whole body.
I'm just
blooms.
saying. So then
Yeah.
that like proves my point that whatever this touches, flowers sprout out of.
Yeah, but
'Cause
that's
the
not what
first-
he thought.
the
Like,
first-
he did
yeah.
a scientific test on himself. Like he was
Yeah.
gonna die either way.
I'm just saying it's. I thought it was, like I said, I'm not a smart man, but I just saw this do something. I'm not gonna then continue to test on myself. And again, that has nothing to do with the narrative.
Yeah.
It doesn't change the story at all. But when I was watching, I was like, why would you then drink it? Because you just the only kind of experience you have with this substance is that it makes flowers sprout. Wouldn't you be worried about flowers sprouting out of you? And I was thinking that to myself as the scene was going on. And then the flower starts sprouting out of him. And I was like, that's exactly what I was afraid of. I was like, my suspicions were immediately confirmed in the scene. So I want to talk more about that later when we like get our kind of our closing our theories on the movie, because I think I have a really cool idea on what the whole like him becoming flowers and stuff means.
Okay.
But I did think that just from a purely like analytical perspective, I was like, why would you do that? In like an empirical, like if you're just a scientist, not even a scientist, just deductive reasoning, why would you ever do that? Like,
Yeah, basic common sense.
Yeah.
And then the other one, the last one I have is it's a fairly Aronofsky thing. He heavily relies on biblical symbols, and like when we were in school, it was a joke, like because the wrestler is about martyrdom, as well, and then you also have the fountain.
I do want to watch The Wrestler because I feel like
it's
when it first
really
came
good.
out, I was like, I don't want to watch a movie about a wrestler.
Yeah.
But now that I'm older and wiser and I know who Darren Aronofsky is, I was like, okay, this movie is clearly not like about a wrestler. Like, so I do want to check that one out.
Yeah, and so then Noah came out, and one of my classmates were like, "Oh yeah, he just went full Bible, I guess."
Right, yeah.
And then Mother came out and like, "Okay, well now I guess we're just gonna deconstruct all of the
Yeah.
biblical myths as well." Like, so
I'd like to do a review of that at some point, just because like I said, I don't like it, but I think it's like worth talking about because it's just like it's so on the nose with all of its biblical references that I think it's interesting enough to talk about, which I
Yeah.
think is kind of the point of what we're doing this podcast for, is kind of have interesting conversations about film. But while I don't like it, I think it's definitely something to talk about. That movie is something.
Yeah, exactly. So and then here you've got obviously we'll find the tree of life. You will be Adam, and I will be your Eve. Very obvious, clear. And then you have the Mayan chief with the flaming sword, just like the angel guarding the
I love that
Eden.
because what is it? I wrote it down. It's a passage from Genesis, uh, chapter 3, verse 24. It's like therefore the Lord God banished Adam and Eve, and he guards like the tree of life with a flaming sword, and it's so clearly redepicted in the flaming sword that like the Mayan chief has.
Yeah, it's wonderful. But then
Like
it's the same.
that's not like beating me over the head symbolism the same way his other movies have been. This is like it was cool
Mhm.
enough that like if you paid attention and read that passage at the beginning, then you can like realize that it's kind of reoccurring again.
Yep. And
That
then
wasn't like overdone, I don't think.
yeah, and then same thing with him getting stabbed in the side. Jesus is typically depicted as being stabbed in the left side with a spear to
Yeah.
confirm that he's dead.
Because what is it? It's supposed to be like he flows like water and blood or something. Isn't that how it is?
Yeah, I think so. Because if it's not just water, because
If
the
it's-
vinegar water
Yeah.
that they give him to drink before, then he would still be alive. But if it's blood and water, then he's
Yeah.
dead. Because yeah,
I know it's symbolized in
right.
like paintings and stuff as like it's silver and red flowing out of his wound because it's supposed to symbolize like the water and blood. That's why I bring it up. But
Huh,
yeah,
I've
so
never seen that before. But yeah, so and then which is a universalism with the idea of first father. Here you have the idea of martyrdom, giving up one's own life for another, being reflected actually
yeah.
in him trying to cover up that wound with the tree sap, and then ultimately dying. But is it really dying? Like it's just dying in a human sense, and that's what
That's why I have an interesting theory on that. So
Okay,
yeah.
I love that. Okay, and that's that's all I got.
So do we want to?
I know we were only 2 hours in, but
Yeah, we're pretty close to that. You had a good question, I think. You told me earlier. Give me something to chew on.
yeah, and I want to know what you think timeline, objects, characters, what's representational and what's real.
Yeah. So I want to say like I think Jade and I have been saying that. So I think to me the only thing that's real is Tommy is when he's the present tense is the only real one. The reason I think that is because I think the book that Izzy's been working on, I think, is the story of the conquistador, which I think is just this like I said, an extreme version of Tommy's character represented in a different timeline. Is all. I don't think all that stuff is literally happening. Um, and I think that Tom, the astronaut, is a representation of kind of like this sort of spiritual journey that Tommy's been going on, because that character is still to me driven the same way Tommy is. It's still he's clinging to this tree. His plan is to revive the tree. He's his end goal is to bring Izzy back to life, I guess, but in his own context, which mirrors what the Conquistador is doing, and it mirrors what Tommy's doing. So I think the only real one, because I think just conceptually for this film, it doesn't make sense. Like, why would he have a bubble spaceship? It doesn't explain any of that. So that's why I view it as more of like a spiritual thing that isn't actually taking place. Like, literally, it's and I also think that the Conquistador is the book. So I think Tommy's the only real one.
So so initially starting this conversation, I had no idea what the future self or spiritual self or whatever it was, or it was part of a book or his real life. And the more we've talked about this, the more I've come to the conclusion, like, either it's all the book or none of it is. And that's because it's all connected. Like, when he's in the bubble with the tree, like, he's seeing his past self, but then also at the end of it, he comes back and he's like, "First Father, I didn't realize it was you," and he's sitting there meditating or whatever, and it's depicting that as Tomas, and then the guy lets him through into the fountain of youth or whatever it is, the tree of life, and so I think either Izzy wrote the book and she included real factors of her real life, because spiritual or future Tom is often remembering and having experiences with Tommy's life along with Tomas's. So I don't think it can all be separate. I think it has to be connected all in some kind of way.
Yeah, and that's a good point. It's like it's so hard to kind of decipher that's such a deep question, because it's like I don't really know what's real and what's not, because the stories are all so connected. So how can one be real and one not be?
Yeah.
And I think maybe the other reason I think that Tom is kind of a spiritual version of Tommy is because he keeps remembering Tommy's life. So it's like, so I know they're the same person, but maybe it's like to me it's like maybe a cognitive representation of like memory or spiritual self, like recognizing the life he had. I think that's maybe why I came to that conclusion. But I think Jaden's right. It's hard to say one's real and the others aren't when they're all so connected.
The only reason why I think that it's like because of the scene where he comes back and he replaces, like, the image of Tom replaces Tomas when the Mayan priest.
You kind of poked holes in like my own theory of it, because like now that happened, I'm like, okay, well, like now I don't know anymore.
Yeah.
That's why it's so
That's
hard.
That's why I'm confused. Like, I think it's either all like it's there's reincarnation basis here, or it's all part of the story.
So I think those are all valid representations, but it's not the one.
You're gonna tell us we're wrong.
It's not the one that I've consistently come to. I think that the past is definitely the book. It's always the book. There are places where the past is happening, and then we get a jump cut right to Tommy waking up with the book in his lap.
Yeah.
I think
I'm glad Jane and we both agree that the book is the Conquistador, because I mean, like I said, I'm not the smartest guy, but I always am proud of myself when I can figure out what's going on in movies. And so I was nervous that you were going to be like, "No, it's all real, man. You guys really missed the beat on this one." So I'm glad the general consensus is it's the book, because that's absolutely what I thought.
Yeah, and then the reason why I don't think that it's all the book is I think that the reason the chieftain sees, "Oh, First Father, I didn't realize," is because that's how Tommy has decided to finish writing the book. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's so good.
So Tommy,
okay, I like that a lot.
Tommy and Tom are the same person. Tommy sees the future, like, this is what needs to happen. So he writes First Father as a depiction of himself, because that's what Tomas is
and
a
that makes so
depiction
much
of
more
himself.
sense, because Izzy tells him, she's like, to finish the book, he's like, "I don't know how." She's like, "You." What is he? I don't know if she says you don't know now. She says you will. Like, so because he doesn't know currently how to finish it, but she's like, "You will," and that makes so much more sense that like his future version would, like, that's the will part. Like, he will learn how to do it, and so that's him figuring out how to finish the book. Oh my god, I like that so much.
I agree with you, but like it's like I think it's like it's the end of the book, or it's like, or I said it's not, like it's either one of the two. But like if it's the end of the book, I still don't. The problem with that is, like, there's still parts of Tom that goes back to being Tommy, and he remembers Izzy's character in there. It's there knowing him. That's why I think.
No, that's
also
what I mean.
that current Tommy is part of the book as well.
I don't think the current Tommy
Not
is
that so current Tommy is real, but he's also in the book. It's like my consensus.
I don't think current Tommy is in the book because he's represented as Tomas. So those are one and the same. Like they don't exist separately. So Tomas is everything in the book. First father then is his future vision of himself, and then Tom in the future is Tommy in the past because of the ring that he tattoos on himself
Okay.
in
Yeah.
in the bed, and then we know that he's been working on a tree that a compound that gives that increases or at least uh, reduces aging or turns aging back.
Yeah.
So
I don't
there,
know that it said it like. It seemed like it was supposed to be like essentially this is everlasting life because I think that's like a big theme in the movie.
yeah, as
So
long as you're
yeah.
eating it, and that's the
Yeah.
point. So it's that he's working on that, and it's also Izzy at the same time because so the last 5 minutes are really convoluted. But what happens is he he approaches Shababa. He meditates on his way outside of the bubble, and then Shababa explodes, and you can literally see like the strands of the light shooting through his body and hitting the tree. So
Which is
his
great
death is
because
then her life.
doesn't Izzy describe it as it's a nebula surrounding a star that's gonna die,
Yeah, around a dying
and
star.
and she's like that's so like what are the odds that the Mayans found like a star that is literally dying to like represent death to them? So yeah, so like the fact that it goes supernova at the end is like yeah, it's so well done. It's just
Yeah,
it's symbolized well throughout the movie, and then like the execution at the end, I was like, oh, this is so purposeful, and
yeah,
it works so well.
yeah. And so he literally gives his life. This is again why I don't really buy into anything that he's ever done is selfish. Is because now he dies, gives his life for the tree to bloom. The tree blooms, and there's a seed, and it's Izzy takes it, and then puts it in Tommy's hand, and
Yeah,
then he plants it on her grave. And so literally, that's the film saying that past and present are not contingent; they're one on each other. They're
right.
one
It's a
line.
big Mobius strip, dude.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. It's all the
So
same.
so like I said when we first started and we first started talking about Tommy's character, and I said I think he's selfish, and I still stand by that. I think everything he does is he's keeping her alive for himself because he doesn't know how to live without her, and that is all paid off at the end. That's why I didn't like say that when we were first getting into it because I think it's paid off because now you have future Tommy who's like he's now accepting death, and then that like it drives the whole ending of the movie. So yeah, I still stand by it. I think he's selfish, but the thing is like he's also not one character. He's three different characters in this movie, and come to this. They all combine to come to this conclusion at the end, where it kind of like it's his acceptance of this death, and now he's moved past it. So I think he's selfish, yeah, but I also think it's he moves past it and it's paid off at the end.
So yeah, that's the what I've always come to is that present and future are the same person. They are real, and then the past is the book
Okay, so can I give my theory on
on the.
what I think the ending is kind of about? So it splits between the conquistador and you got future Tom, and then you have like Tommy planting the seed and everything. So I think that the Tomas gets stabbed, and then he drinks
Mhm.
from the tree, and then he turns into plants. And so when Izzy is telling that story about the first father, about how his body became the roots, and then I can't remember if it's his head or something. Something became the spirit that became the sky. His
Yeah.
spirit became the sky. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the Mayans like kept the head or
No,
something.
the head became Shibaba.
That's it. That's it. So I think that Tomas dying and becoming flowers is the first father becoming the roots that become the earth, and I think that the spirit, because that's why I view future Tom as like a spirit because so he kind of gets blown up in the sky and he becomes the sky, like that's his spirit becoming the sky. My only issue is I don't know how Tommy fits into it, but I think
Hmm.
I think I like the ending because I thought it symbolized kind of also that story of the first father about the different parts of him becoming different things. And so I have a working theory. That's my working theory is that the Tom becomes the sky because that's like kind of the spirit to me of the character, and then yeah, when literally Tomas becomes flowers, like those are rooting plants, like so that to me became the roots. Yeah, I just need to figure out how Tommy works into it, and then it'll be a complete theory. But I still I was watching, I was like, oh, I think it's neat. I think it's maybe I just didn't catch all of it, and maybe there's more to it. But I was watching, I was like, oh, it's like kind of it kind of seemed to parallel some of that myth that came in. I don't. What do you guys think of that? Do you think it's stupid? Do you think I'm way off, or do
No,
you think
I think
it's okay?
I think this is
It's-
totally up to interpretation.
Right.
And
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's meant to be. Like he's meant to be first father. It's meant to symbolize that because that's
Yeah.
literally what happened. Like obviously he's not the real first father. He's an incarnation of
Right.
first father. And because these myths are universal, they're stories that we tell each other because they're representative of universal truths that transcend human understanding is why it works.
Yeah. No, I think it's.
Well, it works that way.
I just thought the parallels like lined up enough that I was like, that's a neat thing, and I think Jane's right.
I love it, though.
Yeah, I
I
think
love
we're all up
there's-
to interpretation, and that's like what I took from the ending. I was like, oh, they're kind of trying to retell kind of that story. And do any of you guys have like any like closing? What are your theories on it?
So I think the whole point of the movie is just so the acceptance of death is what makes life worth living. I think is the point of the movie. So the fact that the first father sacrificed himself, and that created more life because he was by himself and that life wasn't worth living. So he sacrificed himself to create more life. And so I think that that's the general consensus of this book. I mean, of the movie, which I think maybe it's all the book because I think that maybe that's the point of the book too, is to accept death, so you can have a life worth living, and that's what like Tommy ends up. I think at the end he does end up accepting death and moving on. And I think that he finishes the book with that, like with the idealistic, and that's why he is the first father, because he finally accepts death, and that creates the life.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite thought experiments about all of this is because his name is Dr. Creo. I like to think of it as like an alien culture's creation myth, and they've got their Jesus, they've got their Emir, and they've got their underworld, all represented in the Fountain. This book about what life really means.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that idea a lot.
Yeah.
I keep saying that. I like every idea we've had.
Oh yeah. The only thing I will say is, the last time before I watched when I watched this a few months ago again, it really struck me how constricted and confined this film is. It needs room to breathe to make everything work together symbolically. Its attachments to other visuals, to the other symbols.
I think that speaks to what Jane was saying about the runtime. Like
Yeah.
this movie just needed a bit more time.
Yeah.
When I threw it on, because I would pause it to take notes. The first time I paused it, it was like an hour and a half. I was like, are you kidding me? Like Calvin's favorite movie is only an hour and a half long.
Yeah,
Like,
and
I was
especially
expecting like a very grandiose long like runtime, and I was
Yeah.
actually sincerely surprised by the runtime on this. I think you're right. This movie needs a lot more time to have its scenes and then have some time to breathe and really recognize what you're watching.
yeah, because
Which
like think of
yeah.
Midsummer. Like there's a lot less happening in Midsummer, but it's 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Which we are going to do a review on that. We all watched that together not too long ago, and that movie is something. But that's an
Freaks
example.
me out.
That's an
yeah.
example of a movie that like it has a scene that is very explosive. I mean, not literally, but in terms of like how do you digest this scene that just happened, and then
a
it
lot
gives
of
you.
scenes like that.
But then it gives you a long time to digest them because it's not. It's definitely not a slow-moving film, but it is the cadence of that movie gives you time to like see what you saw, recognize it, digest it, and then now you're going to get a new thing to kind of move on to, and that's I think a detriment to this movie is it has these like very powerful scenes, and I don't think you get the time to kind
contextualize
of
everything.
yeah, you don't get any time to like chew on them, figure out what's going on, which again is why like I was excited for kind of you to have the questions and run this episode because you've seen this and it's your favorite. I also this is my first time going through it, and like I said, there's a lot to digest in this, and so I needed someone else to kind of help me through it because I there's certainly stuff I'm gonna miss in it. So I think it's been great to have you as our guide through this one, because there is so much. Like I said, everything about this since we started this almost 2 hours ago. Everything about it, I would have given you a completely different rating of this movie at the very beginning than I would have.
What would you
at
have
the end
given
now.
then?
At the beginning, I mean, this is very. I think because it's so much is going on, and I didn't have the time to take it all in. I think that was my problem with it. I was like, I know I'm supposed to keep up with this, and I know I'm supposed to feel stuff here, I was like, I'm just not tracking because there's just not enough time in this movie, and it's I don't want to say fast paced, but it's just like it's definitely like it's definitely moving the narrative along quickly. And so that was my issue with it. And so, I mean, this would have been kind of like a middle of the road movie to me because I just wasn't catching everything that was happening. And I know that if I had watched it a couple times, my opinion would have changed. But this conversation is essentially me watching it a couple times now because I'm catching up on all the stuff I didn't realize. So yeah, first time, middle of the road. Now, I mean, I'm so excited to watch this movie again. I mean, this is like 8 or 9. Like, I am excited to watch it again.
Yeah. Well, what is the rating scale then?
Yeah, we got to figure something out there. I mean, heavy space trees. I don't know, man.
Oh, that's wonderful.
How many Shabalbas is this?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Shabalbas.
Yeah.
Shibalba?
Yeah, this is an 8 or 9 Shabalbas for me. Like like I'm being so genuine when I tell you, like I was kind of I'm not gonna say not interested in talking about this movie, but I just realized that there was so much stuff I wasn't like tracking or I knew I was missing out on.
Mm-hmm.
And like all your guys' opinions have like just really raised this movie up for me. Like I said, I'm so stoked to watch it again. Like this is it's easily ticked up a couple points for me. Like yeah, this is actually like a genuinely good movie that I just feel like I didn't capture all of it the first time, and so now I'm kind of capturing it now, and so it's become much better just through this conversation for sure.
So, and I think that speaks to the point of it's not breathing enough.
Right.
I think that's this conversation right here is like what let it breathe. And like I liked the movie a lot before this conversation. I would have given like a 7 or an 8. I'm saying this is like a 9.4 out of 10 Chavalas. Like this is the highest rated movie I've done. Like this is my highest rating I've given. So this is I very much enjoyed this experience. This has been great. Like I love this movie.
Yeah, a great pick, Calvin.
Yeah.
This is a great pick.
I'm so glad that you all think that. Yeah, and I think from a filmmaker's perspective, I would probably give this like 6 or 7 Shababas because there's so much that works so well, and there's just it doesn't work well enough because of the runtime. But like as a personal preference, it's a perfect film.
Right.
It's my worldview. It's this deep emotional thing. It's all of these great performances. All of this biblical symbol. Like I love watching Aronofsky's films because they remind me of like how I constructed my worldview and now where I see it.
Right.
And then all of the music and the which we didn't even talk about there.
I mean, we talked a bit about the score.
Well, I was going to talk about like it's done by the Kronos Quartet. Like all of the music is by the string group Kronos Quartet, and they've done a lot of film scoring, and I have a few. They've done like a folk album where they got a lot of major folk artists and then collaborated with them.
Right.
And they're the music and they're the vocals. It's wonderful.
The
And
viewers don't know this, but so we try to pick kind of opening music that maybe kind of fits the tone of what we're going to talk about. We went through so much music to try and figure out like how to start this, and Kelvin was like, "Nope, wrong." I think it's because he's so in love with this score and like how the tone of this movie, and so we had to pick a opening music to fit it. And,
Yeah,
and
this-
luckily we landed on the right one. But we played so much stuff to just even figure out how to start it.
Yeah.
That's how much Calvin loves this movie, and I think
wanted
it's great.
I wanted to make the music all myself, but I just didn't have time to get around to it.
I love that you're so passionate about this review that you couldn't even like settle on music to open it up.
Yeah,
I think it's
'cause
so great.
There's a very specific feeling that I get from the music, and I wanted it reflected in the opening without actually being the same thing or being melodramatically
Yeah.
kind of goofy. But so for me, it's 10 out of 10 Shababas. You know, it's
As it
Nice,
should be.
yeah.
It should. If it's your
It's-
favorite, I don't know how you rate it any
I
different.
mean,
you know?
McKinnon didn't give that to
Well,
I
Jurassic
didn't give it
Park.
to Up.
That's
Yeah.
a podcast that's lost to the ether.
Yeah.
Though.
But yeah, exactly, right. But the reason I'd give it,
Rest
I
in
give
peace,
it a,
value brand Dennis Quaid.
Yeah.
but the reason I give it a perfect score is because that this film has so much more to do than me just as a viewer. It has so much to do with me as a filmmaker too. There's another level of the cyclical attachment of everything. It's me as viewer as audience, and it's me as viewer, as creator. So I'm taking from this and then putting out what I took from it into my own work, and how others then see
Right.
my work as.
I love that you refer to yourself as a filmmaker.
I know
I think
it's fun. It's fun to say. I
I
haven't
love
touched a
it.
camera in like 10 years,
No, I
but
think
like,
it's great still. I love it.
but yeah. So that's why it's always gonna be a fantastic film for me. In like, I knew now this time, watching it, that I was not gonna be as happy as I have been in the past. But I was still like, oh no, still hits all of the right notes.
Is
Not
this
even though
a
I like.
is this a movie that you revisit pretty often, or is this like kind of a
Yeah, I tend to.
something you like kind of savor and you want to wait to have it
No, I tend to
like a
watch
special
this like
treat?
every year or every other year.
Okay,
So
that's still like I think more often than I expected. I thought you'd be like, okay, like I don't want to indulge myself too much, you know.
no, it's just like I certainly listen to the score of the film more often. It's
Yeah,
in my classical music playlist. So that when that always comes
yeah,
up, there's like it'll be like a song that I like, and then there's a loaded, emotional song coming out of here from a very specific scene that I can feel the emotion from it because I remember the music playing at the time of it.
I absolutely feel the same way about a movie we're gonna do a
Mm.
review on later, Interstellar. That's gonna be my pick for favorites. It's gonna be
Hans
coming
Zimmer.
up, and that score is like I just listened to it at work, and it's so great because I just like visualize the scenes, and it's like I get to relive the movie through like this amazing score. And I think that you're so right. The score matches this movie so well. Like I've said 100 times already. Everything in this film complements each other so well, and the score it fits the tone of every scene, and it's great. And so like I totally get the way you feel because I feel the same way about like my favorite movie. It's like I bought the vinyl for it. I love playing it.
Oh
Just
wow.
like yeah, it's like yeah, Hans Zimmer is amazing. And who did the score for this?
Clint Mansell.
Okay,
He did the for Black Swan and The Wrestler. That's
I
what I mean by
I
him
kind of
being
like
like.
that. I kind of like that some director because like that's what Christopher Nolan does. He uses Hans Zimmer and everything. I think the only movie he doesn't use him in is Tenet because I can't remember what film Hans Zimmer was doing the score for at the time. But Tenet is like the only uh, movie that Christopher Nolan does that isn't Hans Zimmer. And the Tenet actually has like a different feel to its score than there's like hip hop stuff in it, which I don't think Hans Zimmer would ever do. Uh, which is fine. It doesn't like ruin Tenet for me, but I think you can tell it's a different composer. But yeah, I do kind of like that. It's like you kind of get these like couplings between like some directors will use the same cinematographer over and over again. They use the same composer over and over again. It's because they just work well together, and I think it works in this film too. Like everything is so cohesive. It's like the composer absolutely understands the tone of the film and what Darren Aronofsky wants, and it totally everything is just coupled so well in this movie. So yeah, so I think we wrap this one up.
Yeah.
All right, we gonna do what are we watching lately?
I mean, that's how we usually do it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, so I've been watching The Great Pottery Throwdown, which is a series on Netflix. It's like one of those kind of like challenge shows where it's like the same as like a cook-off show.
Or Great British Baking Show is what
It's
I
yeah.
thought of.
So yeah, it's in the same vein as that. So it's all British people in this.
Oh, that's why it's great.
Yeah.
Like it's just like Great British Baking Show.
I think
Okay.
the reason I like it so much though, first of all, just to like start it off, so my mom would like casually drop it into conversation like every single time I talked to her. She'd be like, "So I was watching Great Pottery Throwdown, and then I had to cook dinner, and then she'd tell me about dinner or whatever." Or she'd like, "Oh, so I was watching Great Pottery Throwdown, and then I had to let the dogs out." And she just dropped it in all the time. I was like, "Okay, I'll watch it. Stop. Like, I'll check it out." And so Hannah and I, my girlfriend, we've been watching it, and it's really good. It's really unique compared to like the way kind of I think American shows do like those challenge shows
Oh yeah.
where it's like it's
Mm.
somehow it's like oh you won the challenge so now you can like sabotage someone else and it's so American to just like try to fuck over your opponent, which I think is I mean it's like a hallmark of why we're so successful is like we're so willing to do whatever it takes to win. Um, and this British show is so the opposite. So like they'll make their pottery and then they have to get it into the drying room by like the end of a deadline, and like these people like will help out their competitor and like carry different pieces of ceramic back to the drying room to dry out. I was like, it's if this is an American show, you're gonna damn near knock shit out of their hands as they're going to the
Yeah.
drawing room.
Yeah.
And that's where they're like, oh, let me help you, or like they'll try to pull like a big like piece of ceramic out of like a cast or something, and they'll have the other competitors help them out. I was like, this is so odd because like it is so un-American, like this show, and that's why I think it's pretty fun to watch because it's just like it's so different culturally. The other thing about it is maybe I don't like is they don't get enough time to like complete the project. I think to make it like kind of really aesthetically good looking. So like one of the big like last challenges they have in like every season is either you make like a fountain for a garden or you make a toilet, which sounds stupid, but like the all the plumbing and everything that goes behind making a working toilet is so complicated. So it's actually a really hard like build for these people to do. And these are like amateur potters. These are not like they're just people who do it in like their spare time. And so like making a toilet is actually really complicated, and it's just odd that that's like one of the final challenges to
The
do.
pinnacle of
Right.
my pottery experience.
But it always kind of sucks because they're like,
Gotta sit on the pot, dude.
yeah, because they're like, oh, we'll give you 4 hours to
Early.
make a toilet, and it's like never enough. So they always kind of come out crappy, and it's like just give them like all the time they need to make this. That way, it's like because to the viewer, you end up getting a product at the end that isn't like very good. Like most of the like kind of briefs they get, they have enough time to do it, and it looks cool. And some of the stuff is absolutely gorgeous. Like these people who are just like amateur potters make some really cool stuff. But then you get into these big challenges, and it's like just give them more time. That way, it at least looks good in the end. Because some of it's like they don't end up kind of completing their vision because they didn't have enough time. It's like just give everyone more time. That's my only knock against the show. But I just really love it because it's like a challenge face-off type thing, and no one's trying to fuck each other over. Like the hosts are great. They have like 2 pottery experts. One like cries all the time. Like he's so emotionally moved by pottery that he cries. He gets very emotional about it, and it's like so real. It's a really. I usually hate these kinds of shows, but this one's so different to me, especially compared to like American version of the same thing. This was really it was fun to watch, and yeah, shout out to my mom. I finally watched it, so we can talk about it now. Yeah, that's what I got.
So I'm big into like sports podcasts and things like that. Like I watch Pat McAfee's show every day, and from his show I learned about he does interviews with Peter Schrager, who works at NFL.com and NFL Network. He does Good Morning Football, which is like nominated for crazy amount of Emmys every year for sports talk. But he has a podcast now. It's called Flying Coach. It's with Sean McVay, the head coach of the Los Angeles Rams. So you really get to dive deep into like one of the most brilliant offensive minds of all time in Sean McVay, and they interview guys like Joe Judge, and like they just did that one recently, and like it's a cool, like if you're into football, like which is so much more American than whatever Connor was just talking about.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm just kidding.
American football, like
yeah.
real football.
Yeah, I would say soccer.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean I'm a huge fan. Sean McVay is one of my favorite people in the NFL. He's incredibly smart, and obviously the Rams are very, very good. So
Yeah, no, that's a good one.
yeah.
Yeah, and I've got another music recommendation. So I've recently found the band Covet, and the way I found them was interesting. Like my Instagram is pretty much just guitar videos. I don't actually care about people. Like I just want to see guitar videos.
I
while
think you
I'm
did that
pooping.
at what are we watching lately because you're building your own guitar, and so you talked about you recommended just all these guitar videos you've been watching.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
That's,
so I
that's
get
why
this.
that's why I love this segment. It's like I just get to see what's going on in our lives now. I love that.
Yeah, so one of the videos that came through, I started seeing her more and more often. It's her name is Yvette Young, and it is her band, but she was just playing one song, and I didn't realize it was off the album, but it was so cool. So she does a lot of finger tapping, single coil sound, so it's there's a little bit of reverb. It's very clean sound, but it's more where a lot of solo guitar is moving. Really polyrhythmic and polyharmonic sounds. So it's kind of atmospheric, but it's so melodic at the same time.
What sort of like genre would you place it in?
I mean, it's all instrumental. There's one song actually with vocals, but I don't know what genre to
Oh,
call
no.
it because
That makes it even more interesting that it's like so unique that you
Yeah.
can't fit it into something.
it's
No,
not
so I
it's
like
not
that.
yeah, it's not metal. It's not really alternative. You wouldn't call it blues. Like that's why I'm saying polyharmonic and poly.
Those are 3 very
rhythmic.
different things.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah, but
Which
yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
it's not like one of those, and it's
The
not
fact
even
that it has-
close
yeah,
to any of
The
them.
fact that it has aspects of all those is really
Well, it
interesting.
doesn't. That's what I mean.
Oh,
You're just
okay.
saying that there's not a place to put it.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
like it's
Oh,
not
okay,
it's not
gotcha.
even close to metal. It's not even close to blues, and those things are very far apart. That's more what I mean. It's like
Gotcha.
it's I don't know what to really call it, but it's
What's the Covet?
Blues metal band sounds pretty fucking cool.
Covet.
Yeah.
What?
Like a blues metal band? That sounds pretty
Well,
cool.
I mean, all metal is built off blues
Yeah.
and
Well,
blues
that's true. All
scales,
rock and roll
so,
is as
yeah.
well, so
it's
yeah.
all it's all basically that way
Every time they're like
already.
doing
What's
a
the name of
Shimon
it?
band and like just crazy guitar riffs and breakdowns.
Yeah.
What is the name? Covet?
Yeah, Covet.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you want to hear the song that I'm talking about, it's Farewell off of their last album, Technicolor.
Okay, we can put a link to that.
Yeah,
In the
it's-
description.
It's
That
fantastic.
sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks.
So I think we're all wrapped up here. Yeah. With that, I'm your host Connor, and I have my co-host Jaden
Yee.
and former guest Calvin.
Thanks for having me back.
And thank you for listening.